All right, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's virtual discussion, which is on the lessons for our time and future, based on our founding father, Dr. Kenneth David Buchizia Kaunda. My name is Kalinde Mpande, and I am co-president of Zambians Together in the UK. So, as you might have heard, we are being recorded. So this session is being recorded and is being beamed on various platforms, being Facebook and YouTube and other streaming platforms. So this talk has been brought to you in collaboration with our various partners, and Zambians Together is one of them. And we've also got the UNIS, which is the networks of Zambians in the in the UN abroad, the Zambia Oxbridge Alumni Network, and from the Zambians Together partnerships, we always have the Zambia High Commission as our all-weather partners. So we've got our Zambia High Commission staff based in London, watching in the background, and they're partners in most of Zambians Together events. So as I said, welcome. My job is very basic, and I will ask the IT team in the background to play our national anthem. Thank you very much. And it's my honor and privilege just to call upon the Right Reverend Dr. Trevor Musonda Sevlen Mwamba to give us our opening prayer. Reverend, the floor is yours to give us our prayer. Thank you.
Thank you. Let us pray. Let us pray. Lord Jesus, you are the Prince of Peace, who made Kenneth your servant of peace among your people, irrespective of religion, language, race, ethnicity, tribe, gender, or nationality. To sow love where there was hatred, pardon where there was injury, faith where there was doubt, hope where there was despair, light where there was darkness, joy where there was sadness. We thank you for all the good he did as your peacemaker, and may we follow in his footsteps as peacemakers in our days. We pray in your holy name, O Prince of Peace, who lives and reigns with the Father and the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you very much, Reverend. So I will just, as again, welcome everyone. Thank you for the panelists for making your time for this important talk. And as I said earlier, this is basically a talk centered around lessons for our time and the future, and in honor of Zambia's founding father, Dr. Kenneth David Muchizya Kaunda. And my job is just pretty much to take you through the program, and also just to welcome you as panelists, as well as the attendees in the background. And for most of you, you might have received a program, but I will bring it into perspective in terms of what we thought when we were trying to bring this conversation, a virtual conversation, online, in light of most of the discussions that were happening before the barrier and ours after the barrier. So there's a lot in terms of what we thought and we think is one of those things that are of importance to go forward. So I will next in terms of our program, we'll be calling on the Right Reverend Dr. Trevor Mwamba, who is currently our UNEP presidential candidate in this election in 2021, but also UNEP president. Then we'll also have Mundaola Kaunda, who's the first grandchild of Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, to give a family perspective, living under KK as a grandchild and the life of our late founding president. And then we'll follow it into a panelist discussion, pretty much with moderators on various themes that we chose, and will flow in a certain way that it will depict his early life under Akashambatwa, Dr. Akashambatwa Mixta Lewanika, who take it on from a Pan-Africanism point of view. And then we'll also have the Zambian identity, because we know our late founding father loved the arts, and he also loved sport. So we've picked also two distinguished Zambians who do not need much of an introduction in Kalusha Bwalia and Maureen Nilanda, and both cut across transcending different generations, to just give us a synopsis of from the sporting side, Kalusha, having played for KK11, and Maureen from the arts and the influences of KK on that, and then they'll speak in terms of the identity of what we think as Zambians we have. And then we've also got Ms. Chilufya Kapwepwe, the daughter of Salome and the late politician Mr. Kapwepwe, who will discuss around heroes and heroines from KK's time and into modern day times, and just pick up the discussion on how we view things and view the heroes and heroines of both generations who participated in KK, who worked with KK, but also modern day heroes and heroines. And then we'll move it into almost a discussion into KK's economics, KKnomics as it was called. So we've also got Dr. Grieve Chelwa there, a postdoctoral fellow from the Institute of Race and Political Economy, who will pretty much just cut across the various themes of KK's ways of looking at things in his time and through his leadership. And then we'll also have our distinguished senior counsel, Mr. Musa Mwenye, former solicitor and attorney general, as well as last president, who will look at the aspect of servitude and leadership. So especially if, and we picked up, we chose him as a former public figure and someone who knows, the service and what is required. So he'll speak along those lines of servitude and leadership. And then we'll end it with Shishua, Zambian historian and political commentator, who will look at the political dispensation and also a call to action in terms of what are we thinking going forward, what do we want to see. And then we'll end with gratitude and a final prayer from Reverend Susan Matale. So I will now call upon the Right Reverend Trevor Mwamba to just give his political mystic on KK. The Reverend, the floor is yours. Reverend Mwamba.
Thank you very much. Charles Péguy was a French poet and writer, and one of my favorite poems by him is entitled God's Dream, and it begins, I myself will dream a dream within you. Good dreams come from me, My dreams seem impossible, not too practical, not for the cautious man or woman, a little risky sometimes, but from those who share my dreams, I ask a little patience, a little humor, some small courage, and a listening heart. I will do the rest. Now, Charles Péguy was inspired by his faith, and he said this profound thought: which is key to my remarks. Everything begins in mysticism and ends in politics. Now, this provocative statement shows the foundational starting point of how faith and politics relate. It begins with the inward journey, which recognizes that our engagement in politics must be rooted in our participation in God's love. Then everything changes. For at the heart of creation is God's love overflowing to embrace all of life. And we are invited to participate in the transforming power of this love. There we discover the ground of our being, centering all our life and actions. This was clearly revealed in Jesus as God's Son. You see his love for his enemies, his nonviolent response to evil, his embrace of the marginalized, his condemnation of religious hypocrites, his compassion for the poor, his disregard for the boundaries of social exclusion, his advocacy for the economically oppressed, all flowed from his complete and mutual participation in God's love. So the politics of Jesus presented a clear agenda for radical social and economic transformation in his time, as in ours. Jesus' mysticism ended in politics. This was also the case with our dear father, President Kaunda. His politics was informed by his faith. It was an important part of his life. President Kaunda often spoke about it over and over again. It was his mantra, summed up in what Jesus said: love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. This was the core of President Kaunda's life, his mysticism. It framed and shaped him. In his book, Zambia Shall Be Free, we are given a glimpse into this mysticism, which he highlighted in the things that inspired his life. And one of these was a book, In Tune with the Infinite, by Ralph Waldo Trine, which he took with him everywhere he went when mobilizing Zambians for independence. In Tune with the Infinite shows us how his life was about connecting with God and how that inspired his life in the different roles and things he did. And this is clearly reflected in the multifaceted themes our distinguished speakers are covering that define his legacy. Great men and women are never one-dimensional. They are multidimensional, complex, men and women for all seasons. And this is what President Kaunda was. And the anatomy of a great leader is that he or she is a political mystic. As Charles Peguy said, everything begins in mysticism and ends in politics. Great political leaders live this truth and enrich the world with their idealism, love, vision, and hope. They are reconcilers, uniting peoples, communities, and nations. They are inclusionary, not exclusionary. We think of Nelson Mandela, Julius Nyerere, Mahatma Gandhi, Kitumiri Masiri, Lester Pearson, Václav Havel, Mother Teresa, Dag Hammarskjöld, John F. Kennedy, Lee Kuan Yew, and indeed Kenneth Kaunda. They were all political mystics. Mystics in the sense of their awareness of God, of their lives being shaped from the inside out, of being willing individuals to be channels of God's purpose in passionately tackling the world's injustice, economic and social. Political mystics are able to do so because, as the German theologian Dorothea Solle perceived, they are liberated from the three powers that typically hold humans in bondage: ego, possession, and violence. Political mystics know their political calling is to a higher power, and connection with the divine is likewise a connection to all other humans and indeed to all of creation. A relationship, as Solle said, that borrows the eyes of God. Seeing as God does, they bring down walls of divisions and build bridges of unity and community. Where violence erupts, they bring peace. And whatever nurtures the common good of people to flourish. Political mystics live out their faith. It's not a private faith and otherworldly thing, but alive in their political practice. In the words of Dag Hammarskjöld, in our era, the road to holiness necessarily passes through the world of action, thus giving meaning to Charles Pegui's insight. President Kenneth Kaunda was a political mystic. His calling was to a higher calling, in tune with the infinite God. So his opposition to injustice, racism, and oppression were not just political and ideologically, but deeply religious as well. For President Kaunda, saw people as God's children, irrespective of religion, color, creed, gender, tribe, or nationality. He was a great soul, a great human, a great Zambian, a political mystic who dreamed God's dream.
Thank you very, very much, Reverend, for that good introduction and opening remarks for this wonderful talk we're having. So it's my privilege again to call upon Mundaula Kaunda, the late KK's first grandchild. And Mundaula, the floor is yours, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you once again. I am quite humbled to be here. Thank you very much to the Zambians Together UK, Network of Zambians in the UN Abroad, Zam Oxbridge Alumni Network, and ZASA Magazine, and all your partners for organizing this line of conversations. And it is my prayer that they continue, because just because our grandfather, father, uncle, Bashkulu Bantu has gone, it does not mean that his legacy and all that he has passed down to us must die with him as well. So I am truly and greatly humbled to be amongst the distinguished panel of experts present. I think your intro has been quite humbling, and I'm grateful. As mentioned, I am the first grandchild of the late Keke and Mama Betty Kaunda. I was actually quite privileged to have been brought up by them from the tender age of 2 months. So you can imagine, I grew up with them from 2 months until the time I left for varsity. So growing up in their home I always had constant older brothers and sisters by way of my uncles and aunts. So to this day, they look at me like their younger sister. I think what I really want to share about Washkulu is his love for family, how he was so attached to us as the family. I think it's easy to say, how can one run a country and still be able to run a home? How was he able to strike that balance? You know, just from the last couple of days, just listening to the tributes that have come in, it has been worldwide. So the impact he had was worldwide, but still, he loved his family so much. I would like to share from an interview that was held during his 59th birthday by the late Charles Mando. And this is what he said. He said, "What is a man without a family? Any man, married or unmarried." He said, "There is no way you can love the world and not love your family." And that was Shukuru. He was, when I talk about attachment, you know, he then shared in the same interview how he had publicly complained, saying that his biggest worry was that his grandchildren would not be able to remember him because he had become so busy. And, you know, sometimes when I look at that, I see this as such a sacrifice that he gave. I mean, because of his love for Zambia and the world, he would leave us sometimes months on end, maybe days, weeks, and Wambuya would be mom and dad at the time. But this was the balance that they both struck. And he always acknowledged that about his dear Betty. I think another thing that I just want to add was that during the same time, he talked about how my granddaughter Mundaula now says my grandfather doesn't love me anymore. The reason being was that I had not seen him for several days, and my aunt Msata and Uncle Kaweche, they always tease, they say, your grandparents carried you around like a handbag. You know, so you can imagine a young child, maybe I was at about 3 years old, wondering, where is this man? And maybe I'm seeing him on TV, but I'm not seeing him at home. But he always compensated for that. I will never forget our family holidays. What people maybe did not see was our shkulu, where he would sit, have his feet up, and he would be sharing stories, he would be singing, he would be playing his guitar. And then the most, I remember once when we were in Chichele, and that's one thing Shkulu really, really promoted in us, is actually coming to terms with our roots, appreciating Zambia and what Zambia offered. It was easy for him to say, okay, let's fly off to the UK for holidays, but we had national holidays, local holidays in our country. And what was big for Shkulu was the importance of prayer. So I always recall when sometimes you come on the table and very quickly you grab food, eating before praying, and you'd actually stop. You'd look up and see him looking at you and know that you had crossed the line, because he'd always say, always remember God, your creator, for everything that he provides for you. Now, these are the things that we've continued to grow with and carry on in our lives. I remember for the longest time how, you know, like I said, we have family holidays. Washkulu was about one. If you come into our homes right now, even as brothers, I would say brothers and sisters, because amongst us grandchildren, we don't refer to each other as grandchildren, or we pass this on to our children, the great grandchildren as well. Because Washkulu would say, these are your family. You people, mule sungana. You must look after each other. In our family, we must not take on the traditions of the white man by saying brother and sister. By saying cousin. You guys are brothers and sisters. And we always say, if you come against any of us, then you're coming against all of us, because this is the unity, this is the love that our Shkulu taught us. And even though he's gone, these are things that we'll carry on and pass on to our children. You know, it's unfortunate because we're going to miss the Christmas breaks, the Christmas holidays, because up till his passing, Christmas was a big deal. He would always be like so happy when the family gathered, and we continued with that practice. During that time, he would still sing, you know, to us. And Shkulu was a joker. So Shkulu was so funny. You know, he would joke, he would look at you and say, young lady, are you really such and such an age? You know, are these really your children? Because for him, I think it gave him such joy to see us, his grandchildren, maybe the children, then see his great-grandchildren. And that was such a blessing. I'm going to tell you a secret about a love story, a love affair that Shkulu had for 66 years. He would sing to his girlfriend, Betty. He would sing to her. He would play his guitar for her. Earlier on in their years, he taught her how to bowl dance. And this is what we grew up seeing, the love that my grandfather and grandmother shared up to the time of her passing. They had celebrated 66 years of marriage. This for Shkulu was what made him whole, to see that his wife was happy, his children were happy, his grandchildren were happy, his great-grandchildren were happy. So many people ask us, oh, you grew up in State House, you people must have been spoiled. No. There was nothing like that with Shkulu. I always recall a time where, because I was always with him, he took me to meet Joshua Nkomo. And I think I must have been running around or something, of course, misbehaving, being young and everything. And it just took him looking at me, one eye, and I knew that when I got home, I would be in serious trouble because he was going to tell his sweetheart that I had misbehaved in front of people. They taught us respect for people. Living in State House, there were many workers, but to this day, if you meet any of the people we lived with there, we were like family, because this is what Shkulu wanted all the time. He did not, there was nothing like that. Everybody was one. We are so blessed to have had that impact, that lineage of grace. Today, we now are left with his memories. We are grateful for the teachings. We have, from his teachings, he's passed them on to our fathers. In our family, we've got Ango Kaweche, who's the historian. So now every time we need something, we quickly run to him and say, okay, what is it that Shkulu said about this and about that? I also want to share just very briefly about once how he talked about how greed will never have good results. We must always share, no matter what it is. We should always be able to come together and share. That was Shkulu. Shkulu loved sweets and biscuits. I know maybe people don't know that, but what he would do every time you go and visit him, you take him mama sweets and biscuits, and guess what? He would share everything. By the time you're leaving, he has shared all his sweets and his biscuits. And this is what he has taught us, to be givers of the word, givers of whatever you can share with other people. You know, because at the end of the day, when we die, we go with everything that we've ever had. So we are grateful and quite blessed and thankful always that our Shkulu was a blessing in our lives. I want to just end very quickly to share something. And just before that, having grown up with my grandparents from 2 months until I left for varsity when I was about 21, I guess now people will start trying to guess how old I am. I never once saw them fight. Not that they didn't. And sometimes he would actually share. He says basically what would happen when we're fighting, you know, I'd be there, and somebody knocks, we'd quickly collect ourselves and simply say, come in. You know, so I would walk in there, not knowing there had been battle stations, but these are sort of the foundations they gave us. And these are the things that we carry on and our children carry on. And we pray that as Zambia as a whole, let us learn from the teachings of our grandfather Bashkulu. I would cry earlier in life because they would say Bashkulu Bantu. And I'd say, no, Bashkulu Bantu, he's my grandfather. He's not everybody's grandfather. It's later on in life as I grew older and I understood the impact Bashkulu had, not on one person, not on two people, not on Zambia, but on the world at large. Please allow me, as I'm about to conclude, to share something with you. In December 28, 2013, during an interview by Shaka Sisulu, Shkulu was asked, do you have any dreams in your children and your grandchildren? And he said, and I quote, what I dream for my children, my grandchildren, is prayer for them, each of them, each one of them, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. I pray for each one of them May the good Lord God Almighty bless you, guide you in your thoughts, in your words and deeds, each of them, even you, my guests. I am saying the same thing to you, even when I greet you. I, saying, may the good Lord Almighty continue to bless and guide you. That's the right thing to do for him and for his people on earth, east, west, north, south. Amen. That's what I do. I thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Mandaula. And it is our honor to have had you, to have you as well, and to listen through your story and your wisdom imparted and passed on from, our Washkuru. He's our Washkuru. He's our father. He's our uncle. He's everything to us. He's our founding father. So thank you very much. So I will now just ask if we can all just give ourselves, a minute of silence, just in remembrance of our late founding father, before I hand over to the next team who will carry out a moderation of the discussion. So we can now start our minutes of silence. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well observed. And it is now my privilege to pass on the baton to my two co-moderators who will carry on with this discussion. And let me just remind everyone, if you've got any questions regards the panelists and their portions, could you please just channel the questions into the chat? And it's now my honor to call upon Melissa and Muyatwa. Could you please pick up the baton, and over to you guys. Thank you.
Well, good evening, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. My name is Muyatwa Sitali. I am a member of the Network of Zambians working in the United Nations in missions outside Zambia. We're really privileged to have you join us tonight, and it is my personal privilege to co-host this event with my colleague and friend whom I have not met in person, but we've been corresponding as we're preparing for this event, and that's Melissa Kapulu. We're really privileged to have all of you join us as we have this discussion tonight, looking at the life of somebody who we have described as an icon, a philosopher, a statesman, but we know that one word is not sufficient. Not even a sentence can describe fully who he's been. Not even a book can give us a full description of the man whom we're honoring tonight. And so the lessons that we're discussing today are to help us look into the future as we stand on the shoulders of this giant, picking the right lessons from the past, looking into the future with courage, knowing that the courage from before
I'll quickly pick up from that. So apologies, my co-moderator has lost his network. So as he has said, we are very delighted to have you all attend this event. Thank you very much. We do have a distinguished panel of experts in their own rights who will speak to the various themes and topics that we have picked up that are symbolic to the life that KK has lived, including the era during his legacy. So to start us off with the first sub-theme, which is about Pan-Africanism in modern day Africa, I'm really delighted that our next speaker has agreed to join us and be part of this event to share his thought process in regards to Pan-Africanism in modern day Africa. So I will encourage everybody to chime your questions in the Q&A section of this Zoom platform, so that as we go along, you can actually ask your questions through the Q&A. So do make good use of that. This is more about having a conversation and a discussion with the various panelists that we are having. So please ensure that you do type in your questions in the Q&A session. So I think our first speaker in this session actually needs no introduction, because he is somebody that is very well known, is a face that has been on the Zambian scene and has set trends in terms of our democracy and where we are as a country. So Dr. Akashamba Twambikusita Lewanika is a Barotse Prince. He has served in a number of portfolios in various parastatal companies, including being a convener and co-founder of the multi-party, the Movement for Multi-Party Democracy, MMD. He served as MP for Mongu and is a passionate Pan-African and is a politician and businessman. Dr. Akashamba Twa, thank you very much for joining us. You can unmute yourself. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay,
Thank you very much. I would like to discuss, I think that the historical context and the focus on particular things might be necessary to address this issue. In particular, I wanted to start by referring to three factors. The first factor is what I call shoulder to stand on factor. The second one is the gender factor. The third one is the we factor. The shoulder to stand on factor is a recognition that all leadership contributions, all leaders stand on the shoulders of those leaders who came before them. And it is no discredit to any leader to identify the shoulders he stands on. So it is not discredit to President Kaunda to say that he stands on the shoulders of many people, and I'll concentrate on the political career. He stands on the shoulders of those who initiated and led the organizations such as the Mwenzo Welfare Society in 1924, Mr. Donald Swale and Reverend David Kaunda. He stands on the shoulders of those who initiated and organized the Livingstone African Welfare Society, which was the first urban one in 1929, which was led by a gentleman called Mr. Nyirenda, whose secretary was my father, Mbikisita Lewanika. Other members were Nelson Nalumango, who later also features in the history of Zambia. He stands on the shoulders of the other leaders who organized welfare societies in Kitwe, in Luanshya, in Ndola, in Kabwe, and other towns. The Kitwe Welfare Association was led by my father again, Big Stalwanika. The Luanshya one was led by Dauti Yamba, and those others who led the other ones also. He also stands on the shoulder of the leaders of the Northern Rhodesia Federation of Welfare Societies, whose first president was Mr. Dauti Yamba, whose vice president was Mr. Mufana Lipalile in 1946. He also stands on the shoulders of those who initiated and organized the first political parties that he joined, which is the Northern Rhodesia African Congress, whose founder leader was Mbikusi Luwanika, and other members were, the vice president was Dauti Yamba, Mr. Nabuliato Robinson was Secretary General, Mufana Lipalile was treasurer, the Reverend Mumpansha, as a young Methodist minister, was also in the committee. Again, Mr. Dauti Yamba, who was there in the first Welfare Association in 1924, was still there. He participated in the Northern Rhodesia African Congress. And Dr. Kaunda also stands on the shoulders of those Africans who participated in the provincial as well as the Northern Rhodesia African representative councils, among whom were the two who in 1948 became the first indigenous Africans in the Northern Rhodesia Legislative Council. That is Nelson Nalumango, as well as Reverend Chilesi Kasokolo, and others, because in 1954 and so on, more people came. So he stands on the shoulders of all those Africans between 1948 and 1961 who participated as members of the Legislative Council. But it's not only in political parties or in legislatures, it also stands on the shoulders of the Africans who led the trade union movement from the 1940s. So this is basically the question of the factor of shoulders to stand on. The other factor I wanted to look at is the gender factor. This is not a very positive one because the role of women in our political development, but I should also say in all other areas of human endeavor, as you know who used to say, is not very well pronounced and is not very much appreciated, which indeed is a shame. But it is a fact that from the very beginning, women were involved even in the political movement. I know for the fact that my mother joined the Congress immediately it was founded. I also know that Mrs. Yamba, although she attended the very first foundational meeting of Congress in 1948 and presented the very first contribution to Congress, which was coming from Mwata Kazembe. Throughout the 1950s, an increasing number of women were participating and playing very critical role, which unfortunately have not been fully appreciated. Particularly after the 1960s, when Princess Nakatindi became the first leader of the UNIP Women's League. This really brought women prominently into the political leadership arena. However, ironically, the creation of segregated women's wing of political parties, while it brought attention of women's playing active role in politics, it also showcased women playing secondary roles. And that is really, for going forward, it's something that we need to re-examine. That the fact that our political parties have continued to have segregated women's league, although it makes women very visible, it also marginalizes them into playing secondary role and sometimes rules them out of the mainstream. As you know, our political parties have women's leagues of one kind or the other, but they also have what they call the main body. And the main bodies are not just men like M-A-I-N, they tend to be men, M-E-N. So that is the factor of gender that going forward we need to bear in mind. The third factor that I wanted to draw your attention to is what I call the we factor. We, W-E, the plural factor, that all leadership contribution is a matter of collective effort. There is no leader who can achieve anything on their own. Therefore, if we examine President Kaunda's political career and leadership in the other sectors, we recognize the we factors, that he shared a we factor with his colleagues, such as Mr. Kapasa Makasa and Malama Sokoni, who together with him carried out the assignment to transform the branch of the Northern Rhodesia Federation of Welfare Association into a branch of the Northern Rhodesia African Congress, quite early on after the establishment of the Congress movement. He shared a we factor with his colleagues in the Northern Rhodesia Africa Congress when he joined it to play the role of Secretary General in 1953, from 1953 to 1968. He shared a we factor when he joined his colleagues who had earlier broken up or broken away from the Congress led by Mr. Nkumbula. His colleagues such as Munus Palo, who broke away in 1957, his colleagues such as Mr. Kapwepwe, Mr. Kamanga, Mr. Mundia Nalumino, and others who had left in 1958. And together, they shared a we factor in founding the Zambia African National Congress in October 1958. He continued to share a we factor with them and other leaders and the membership of ZANC until it was banned in March 1959, as they began a more militant, accelerated campaign towards independence. He also shared a we factor with many of his colleagues, the leadership of the ZANC, who spent much of 1959 under house detention, as well as in prison. He also shared a we factor with those leaders who were not arrested, but who continued to try to mobilize the political movement. Leaders like Mr. Kalisini, Mr. Dixon Nkonkora, who formed various parties in 1959, which ultimately, towards the end of 1955, merged to create UNIP. Indeed, he shared a we factor when, after being released at the end of 59, in January 1960, he was appointed as president of UNIP, taking over from Mainza Chona. And he continued to share a we factor with the independence movement across party line throughout the 1960s in the last run towards independence. Very critically, he also shared a we factor together with Mr. Harry Nkumbula in 1962, when they had a bipartisan agreement to form a coalition government. This bipartisan cooperation enabled the establishment of the first majority African cabinet in the development towards independence. In a very real sense, this bipartisan we factor was the door opener towards independence. And of course, he shared the we factor from 1964 up to 1991 with his colleagues and members of UNIP during the party's tenure as a ruling party in Zambia. What is important about these factors I've pointed out is that it is not a discredit to President Kaunda to recognize that he worked in cooperation with others, to recognize that his achievements were in many cases shared achievement. It is no discredit to him and his fellow leaders of UNIP to recognize and appreciate the fact that the Zambian motto, One Zambia, One Nation, was actually picked from the text of the Barosland Agreement in 1964. There was a text there which talked about a commitment to creating one country, one nation. And that is the one that was picked, that after independence, it became One Zambia, One Nation. It is therefore another shared positive contribution in laying the foundation of Zambia going forward. Unfortunately, this shared accord, the shared accord which built the foundation of Zambia going forward, required to be followed up by a shared, equitable national integration and a shared, genuinely participatory governance. I say unfortunate because the Constitution of Zambia itself is not consistent with the spirit of sharing power. The Constitution of Zambia is characterized by a facilitation of personalized leadership. it is characterized by a facilitation of the practice of ruling parties actually practicing the capture of the state. This tendency of falling short of the requirement of sharing is also featured in the economy. So that unfortunately, even after independence, the dual character of the Zambian economy, the Northern Rhodesia economy, continued in the Zambia economy with a great concentration, similar concentration as in colonial days, on a modern economy based along the line of rail, ignoring, neglecting the majority of Africans, particularly those in discarded rural areas. This constitutional character and this economic character is part of the problem factors that make our politics, such as elections, particularly elections, into matters of life and death, which introduces violence, which introduces corruption, which introduces so much desperation for winning, because both our economic system, our governance system, tends to be a winner take it all. And therefore, people out of desperation do anything to gain power, to maintain power. And this, in a sense, going forward, is an element that we have to look at. I am mindful that my topic was to look at lessons and to also look at the future. And in doing so, I'm looking at the younger generation. What is their mission, given this background? And it is quite clear that they have their way set up for them, that these outstanding problems, which have not been resolved in the past, are challenges that we must address. That is at national level. At Pan-African level, at African continental level, there are also worrying characteristics. The Pan-African movement, which was initiated by individuals and organized in a people-driven fashion, has ultimately been left to be driven by states, to the extent that some people, including myself, think that the African Union is operating like a club of heads of state with very minimal influence, direct influence from the people. This leaves behind a challenge for the present and future generation to again take up this unfinished homework of reconstituting a Pan-African body. Perhaps we can even dare to resurrect the old Pan-African dream of constituting an all-African People's Union government, which is more people-driven than the current arrangement, which is two-state dominated. That again is the challenge to present and future generation that falls on our shoulders. And it is important to look at that history. And if we go back to the beginning of the Pan-African movement, to recapture the original agenda, which is one, to restore the human dignity of all Africans. Two, to recapture, take back our control of our land, natural resources, our labor, so that they are used for the benefits of all Africans, by Africans. Also, the original agenda is that we should be economically and in every sector as African people, at home and abroad, be second to nobody, dominated by nobody, but we should truly be able to be in command of our livelihood, in freedom, justice, and equality on a global level. These are part of the missions, the original Pan-African mission, which remain to be taken up as challenges for the present and future generation. It is my hope that the younger generation will dare to recapture the dreams of the founders of the Pan-African movement on a global basis. Indeed, in reconstructing towards an all-African People's Union government, we should dare to bring our diaspora nations and communities into full membership of the Pan-African Union government, so that we can take over and stand on the shoulders of those who have come before, but also use these opportunities to look at the mistakes and the shortcomings that have happened before, during, and since the leadership of the President Kaunda in Zambia, and take those as our responsibility, as our heritage challenge, to continue the struggle of the Pan-African movement towards its historical mission being fulfilled. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think, as always, you unpack so many things for us that there's so many lessons that we have to take from the historical context, and then bringing it forward to what we think and know that we need to take forward in the Pan-African movement. Thank you so much for such a passionate talk to us. And I think it's a wake-up call for us and future Zambian generations in terms of reawakening the spirit of Pan-Africanism. I think for the sake of time, I will not ask a question and just say thank you so much. I think you deserve an hour on this subject, to be honest, so that you can we can really have a more detailed discussion and unpacking of some of these things. So with that, I'll just say thank you so much for giving us such a passionate appeal and talk in unpacking some of the historical context. And I like the fact that you said that this is more about we. How do we move forward as a collective, as a people, and as and in the true spirit of Pan-Africanism. Thank you so very much for unpacking that for us, Dr. Bikosita Lewanika. Thank you.
Thank you.
So with that, I think this now brings us to the next topic that we're discussing this evening. And the two speakers that are coming up are speaking to the Zambian identity, which comes on very well with what Dr. Bikosita Lewanika just spoke about in terms of how do we as Zambians reignite and ensure that we're coming up as a general collective. I think that the two speakers coming up, need no introduction to the audience because these truly embody what the Zambian identity is. Whenever you travel out of the nation, the first thing somebody says when they ask where you're from and you say you're from Zambia, they'll either ask about KK, or they'll ask about Kalusha Bwalya, or they'll ask about a musical giant. So sport and art have really been fundamental and synonymous to the life of Kenneth Kaunda. And it is very, very important that we showcase these based on the Zambian identity, because these really define how we are seen out there, outside the borders of our country. So for the next session on Zambian identity, I would like to introduce Kalusha Bwalya, who actually needs no introduction because he's such a true Zambian icon, as well as Ms. Maureen Lilanda to the session, so that we can discuss on how our Zambian identity using sport, football, and music as examples of how we are seen out there outside of our borders. So thank you very much, Kalusha. And if you don't mind, I'll call you Great Kalu for this session. And Maureen, I'll call you Mama Maureen, if you don't mind. So thank you so much for agreeing to be part of this great topic on Zambian identity. So I will start with you, Great Kalu. We know Kaunda's life was very much around sport and football. I mean, you've played in the KK11, which then transitioned on to being Chipolo Polo. So can you just tell us what you personally think and feel in regards to how you've taken the Zambian identity outside of our borders?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, moderator Melissa. Thank you so much for the invitation, for everybody who has gone before me. All protocols observed. I've learned already so much from the speakers that have gone before me. It is incredible. And I think that is why when we come to a topic as identity, I think this is Zambia's identity, and KK, the Kenneth Kaunda, that is exactly what he brought. I'm entirely grateful that I was born and raised and lived in the era of KK, being born in Zambia, of course, and being raised in Mufulira in Kamchanga. So my earliest recollection of KK is when we were young people and you were at school, and we didn't have a television because unfortunately where we live, we didn't have lights. We used candlelight in my early childhood. So we would go to the neighbor's house to watch a little bit TV, sneak in. Televisions are not like they are today, that almost every household has it. So in the area that we lived in, maybe there were 3 or 4 people that had television, and so you would go there and peek through the window, and you see the big man, KK, the president, founding father of Zambia, and so you will catch a glimpse of it, and so. I think I was grade 2 or something when KK came to Mufulira, and we had to go and line up in a way to go and cheer him. And so we moved. If the people are from Mufulira, they will know that from Ibuyantanshu Primary School in Kamchanga to walk all the way a little bit by the SPA there, in Chibolya, it's a long distance. For a 7-year-old or 8-year-old. And so we all went hand in hand and waited for the convoy of the president, KK. And when they came, we waited maybe 2 hours. And so we were standing in the scorching heat and everything. So when the motorcade came, you just see the white flag. And so that left a great impression on people like me, of course, and also with everybody, and we used to talk about it for months to come. But it had a great impact on all of us as young people, because he was a statesman, he was a leader, he was a president, and when you come to sport, I was also privileged. My father was in football at an early age. He used to take us to watch football matches because it was a long time ago in the National Football League. And he himself one time was the chairman of Mufulira Blackpool. So I grew up in a football a family, and started to watch matches probably when I was 3 years old. I was watching football matches week in and week out. We watched in Mufulira Blackpool. That was our home. And when you went to the football match and you just see that convoy come, just before the match would start, and especially at the Dag Hammarskjöld Stadium, because we couldn't go to Lusaka, it was too far. You just thought, hey, I hope one day, that I can also be able to stand there and greet the president and greet KK. And fast forward, by the way, I met one of the KK11 just now in the funeral last week. Peter Muhango was playing in the match that I went to see. Zambia beat Zaire 2-1, I think. I think Richard Stevenson scored the goal and Peter Muhango scored. That must be 1976 or 70 something. So one of my earliest days as a young person watching a football match, international match. And so fast forward to 1983 when I'm given a debut in the KK11 at Dag Hammarskjöld Stadium. 1983 seems like a long way ago, a long time ago now. It's almost 38 years ago. And so we were there. We had trained hard. Bill Magari was the coach, and we had trained extremely well. Camped in Kitwe, and we came with a team. Dag Hammarskjöld Stadium, coming with a bus. In those days, Football Association had the bus, the Tata bus written. So everywhere you went, the people were cheering. And so your heart was already pounding from Kitwe until you came to Lusaka. And we lined up, of course, where I was making my debut. I was playing on the left. I think Peter Kaumba was playing on the right in that time. In this match, in my debut in 1983, we played against Uganda. So you're standing there, and now the convoy comes for real. So and the big man, KK, he loved this football. It's actually like if you trained hard, and now the honor of the team comes. So KK was like the honor of the team when he would come, and everybody would be moving backwards as he went and greeted us first as the home team, and it was it was you have to be strong to stand there, and so this was my first game, and needless to say, we had a terrific match. He came out, juggled the ball, kicked it in the beginning, and the match would not start before KK would touch the ball. So it left a big impression on me, and that's the start of the interaction. The Zambian identity that you're talking about is the history of KK11. I think you learn so much as a young person when you go. The values, the people they taught you about timing, about the spirit of playing, the resilience, the determination, the desire to play for the KK11. So it was very, very important for us to win the match. And that Zambia, I think in those days, was known as a big country, big footballing country, because when you travel and then you tell the people that Zambia has beaten Cote d'Ivoire before, Zambia has beaten Tunisia, Zambia has beaten Morocco, Zambia has beaten Senegal, Zambia has beaten Ghana, Zambia has beaten Nigeria. So people would think, hell, no, this is not the Zambia of today. So yeah, Zambia was a big team. The KK11, you play at Independence Stadium, and even today you meet people and they say they were at this match when Zambia played against Gabon, when Zambia played against Morocco. These are, you would think that the whole of Zambia at Independence Stadium, which carried 30,000 people, you would think that everybody was there. You had the stadium which would probably bring in 60 or 80,000, but no, because that is the kind of love that the people have for sport. So yeah, Africa is better off for people like KK. He brought his contribution to Zambia is immense. What we've talked about when you talk about South Africa, the ANC being there, we talked about Zimbabwe. The great-granddaughter talked about Zimbabwe being housed in Liberation Struggle, being housed in Lusaka. Everybody was there, Namibia, Angola, Mozambique, and such was his presence. And for us, the journey that we have traveled as Zambia, it is a pity it is not well documented, because you know that in those days when you came to the national team, with the coach that we had, I was privileged to have Samuel Zumunjovu, who was coach of the team, who was my coach at Mufulira Wanderers. And then in the beginning, in fact, the first trophy, for people who don't know, the first Zambian trophy that was won with Colonel Brightwell Banda in 1984 in the Eastern Central African Challenge Cup. Today, we play COSAFA and then there's the CAFA, but we played in 1984 in the Eastern Central African Challenge Cup, and Zambia won in 1984, and then we were also honored by Kenneth Kaunda as the president. So everybody was given OGDS, or Order of Distinguished Service, so which was a massive for us as footballers. So it has been a remarkable journey in terms of the time that Zambia, that from the time that we came into the national soccer team until we probably went 11 years without losing a single match in Zambia, without losing a single match for almost 11 years. And this is also the time when we come into 1988 that Zambia was able to go to Seoul, to the Olympics. And, the Zambia beat Italy, of course, but we played against Iraq and lost only to West Germany. And so that was Zambia. People recognized the efforts that the players did put in. So many talented players who have been able to play for the team, and that it is the kind of history that sometimes is not overlooked, but that we don't usually talk about, and it will be important also to document it. The history that we have as a footballing nation is very, very important for Zambia going forward, because the person who was dedicated, who made it is owned the Zambian national team, was Kenneth Kaunda. So he made sure that his teams were able to perform. He sponsored the team. Before, there was no sponsor. We didn't have a sponsor. We didn't have Nike. We didn't have Sony. We didn't have anybody to sponsor the team. So it was only the government, through the efforts of the president, the founding father, KK, who was the government, would buy tickets. Even today, I'm sure it is the same, that the patron of the national soccer team, or the patron of Football Association of Zambia, is able to make sure that all the teams are able to participate. But I think more so in the past, when there was no sponsorship, he was able to take charge of all of that and make sure that Zambia was well looked after, well funded, well dressed, well traveled, getting the results, getting the needed allowances, that come with their effort. So yeah, it's as a personal experience for me. I think it made who the person I am today, because when I went to the national team at a young age, I found people there. They were able to teach us that you have to work hard, especially in football. And coming from mining town like Mufulira Wanderers, where the people were used to seeing attacking football, and you were used to seeing that the team never said die, never even in the last minute. We came. Mufulira Wanderers was also known as Maite Wine Chongolo. So for the people who don't speak Bemba, that means that Maite always wins in the dying minutes. So we also transformed that ideology or that idea into the national team and never gave up until in the dying minutes, Zambia would always come back. It's not in the football being a team sport. You always had other people who were leaders. In the went to national team were guys like Jones Chilenji, were guys like Jack Chanda, Alex Chola, who was my mentor and master control, and of course Yuka Godfrey Chitalu was my coach and was my father's favorite, and scored so many goals for Zambia. So just to mention those people that they were always there for us to teach us the good fight for Zambia. So yeah, interaction with the president, KK, just to get to State House in those days, coming from where we come from, to go to State House to be invited. You go in tracksuits, or when we were going to Seoul, that wearing the green blazer, going to State House, the president KK would come there with the big plates. I always call them big plates because never seen so much such a big plate in your life, coming from where you come from, and so with a coat of arms on it, and then he would be dishing out, and I remember the manager always, the team manager always said, when we go there, please don't, I can hope to say that, don't take too much food, boys, please, just take utunono, because some of you, I know you to eat everything. So, so there was always a lesson. And some of the boys would plan, that when they go there, they would say to the president, they said, because KK actually used to ask, boys, anybody wants to say something? And we were wanted to say, hey, nobody goes there, because sometimes the guys will say, next time if we go to State House, we'll ask the president if we can at least, but TV. Boys will be boys.
Yes,
So
yes.
we were well disciplined. President will come. He always wanted to win with discipline. Everything was for him. You had to win with discipline, with dignity and honor, he would say. And we boys, we have to do everything possible to win this match. He never talked about losing, and also you have to play in style, not rough. I think the president, he never heard him, the KK never heard him speak about us losing. No, he always said, give your best, and never said, dignity and honor, let's go out and let's go on. But when you came out from there, you super motivated. And for me, having interacted later with KK, with my time as a coach and also a chairman of association, and in 2012, when Zambia got a chance to go to Gabon and win the Africa Cup of Nations, the president then, Michael Chilufya Sata, called me and said he was going to send, when we reached the final, he was going to send two former presidents. He was going to send KK, and he was going to send the fourth Republican president, Rupia Banda. And so when they came there, and Hevrena, Chris Katongo, and the boys did the rest with in the finals against the big team of Cote d'Ivoire. And then we went on the podium because it was like a dream. for us to win the trophy. And I remember when Guy Scott was representing government as vice president, and of course when KK got his hands on the trophy. Even now I can see him, he was like very, very emotional. Shed a tear for Zambia, because I think over the years he had developed so many teams, and I think his dream had come true in terms of the KK11, to say, that Zambia has been able to lift the trophy in 2012. So, for me it was full circle, because I was there when in 1993 with the captain of the old team with the Gabon air disaster. So, to come back at the same place, 7 kilometers away, to lift the trophy, and the big man KK was there. So I felt, that we had gone full circle in this KK11 and Chipolo Polo. So it was a triumph for all of us as Zambians. And we spent some time last year with KK. He was at Pamosi Hotel, and I think it was Kaweche said to me, come and say hello to the big man. So I think it was in December. So I went to see him, and I was just by myself. There was nobody. I was there, just there, talking, and I wanted to say, hey, let me go now. I was there for about an hour. So then he asked, but where are you going? I said, so he said, where's your wife? I said, no, she's in South Africa. So I said, no, sit. Just sit, So I felt that it was a wonderful time for me. I stayed a long time in his presence, and grateful for all the, what he has done and the teachings. And if we can, as Zambians, emulate that. And also I agree to the forum when they had said that going forward, we should be able to remember the day that he was born, also on the 28th of April, which President Edgar Chagwa Lungu announced as a holiday. That is fantastic. And I think the teachings, more things that I hear, the panelists who are here, the things that they're saying and what they're building on, we should always continue as Zambia, because I think that is our identity. Is KK. If we follow that is what we Zambians should be renowned for loving each other, being together, unity, humanism, helping each other, and just the love that Zambia should have. I think I would certainly feel that everybody has to play their part so that we can continue in this direction. So it is a celebration and we hope that we'll continue for many, many years to come. I thank you most sincerely.
No, thank you so much, Great Kalu, for your perspective and giving us some really personal insights into your relationship with football and KK, transitioning through the so many different times as you've moved in your career. So I would like to just bring on Mama Maureen to speak to us from the art perspective and speaking to music. So if we can spotlight, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. And I just want to hear from you what your perspective is on the Zambian identity from the music background. I mean, during Kaunda's era, we were given the opportunity to hear, through programs like folk music, Time for Music, we were introduced to so many indigenous Zambian artists, and to see KK's love for music and the guitar. Just speak to us in how you have more or less identified with KK's love for music and then taken that forward in your own career. Just unmute yourself, Mom.
Sorry, I thought I did. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the invite. I'm very excited, very humbled to be part of this momentous program this evening. Yes, identity, the Zambian identity to me as an artist, learning from KK was the warmth, patriotism, and the love for God. I remember the first time I ever traveled abroad and I was being identified as a Zambian artist. My identity to Zambia was, the first thing they said is, you come from the country of KK. And the guy, the gentleman who was speaking to me in the hotel, his name was Kenneth. And he says, I was actually named after your president. I come from Senegal. And I was like, oh, wow, I was totally blown away. I was a teenager by then, and this was in America. I too, like Kalu, was fortunate to have been brought up in KK era. I was bred in Lusaka. My first interaction with KK was in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, where my father was stationed, and he was coming to visit Zambia. He must have been coming for, obviously, official business. And you see, there were the two heads of state. There was Haile Selassie, and there was President Kaunda. The feeling I got when I saw Haile Selassie, I couldn't even be bothered. I mean, I really did not know how important he was, you know, to the country and to the preachings of the Jah. But when we saw President Kaunda disembark from the plane, we were speechless. I must have been about maybe 5, 6 at the time. And already at that age, I had that sense of pride just to be associated to KK. The Zambian identity, for me, the Zambian identity is about patriotism. It's about knowing your God. It's about unity. It's about standing firm, and it's about being proud. I remember primary school, we had to sing the national anthem. And I think that's what set the seed in me to be patriotic, to be proud to be a Zambian. We had to pray. That also introduced God in our lives, because our head of state believed in God. In whenever he addressed us, there was always the mention of God. There was always the mention of unity. There was always the mention of pride. His love for music was shown from whenever he addressed the nation or whatever meeting. Just by him punctuating it with the Tiende Pamozi was enough to show you that music alone shall stand. I've just borrowed something from his granddaughter that he actually even serenaded Betty before marriage. So he truly was an artist at heart, and it came through even as a president. And you see, we may never remember all that he might say in his speeches, but the one thing that people will always quickly remember are the songs he penned down. Examples of Tiende Pamozi, examples of the AIDS song, you know, that is always quickly to come to people, because music is the medium that has been used through time immemorial. Before we could put pen to paper, music was the medium for messages, be it a funeral, be it a wedding, be it war. Music has always been. And we see that even as a nation, Parliament is opening, we have the drummers. You know, a wedding is, a funeral is being done, we have everything, every music also being played. I've lost my screen.
We can still hear you, so you can just go ahead.
Okay, sorry for that. Yes, so truly he was a musician at heart. So for me, my identity with President Kaunda was the fact that he was an artist at heart, and he had the artist's interest at heart as well. The highlight for me as a musician was when he ordered the local stations to play majority Zambian music. That for us was a plus, because in the 70s, 80s, we saw the dominance of rumba, which was then killing the Zambian artist business, because then there was a preference to listen to Congolese music or buy their music. And he saw that there was a grave disparity in income for the Zambian artists. And yeah, our incomes were just totally gone to zero because of the preference for foreign artists. And he ordered that the Zambian stations play the majority of Zambian music. And I think that was the rebirth of Zambian music, because it had gone on a decline. Only an artist, only someone with a passion for music, only a president with the passion for art would have ordered that decree. For that, I think we are forever grateful. That saw the rising of the music, and we've never looked back from then. And it has seen so many artists wanting to go into music because the ground is ripe. The market has grown. We are known internationally. And I think for me personally, as a Zambian artist, President Kaunda encouraged me to be indigenously Zambian. I started my music being a cabaret artist, and that was sort of like a copycat artist. And from my first travel abroad, I got criticism, very bad criticism, because I was named a Zambian artist, but I was not portraying Zambian music. I was not delivering Zambian music. And I had to come back to Zambia and, you know, reflect on what I was being told, because I was a teenager then, and there was a lot of resistance. Being a teenager, anyway, naturally, you will resist any form of advice or guidance that you may deem is contrary to what you believe is right. And I was really blown away with the uses of the time. But as I came back, you look at your president, who is any occasion any opportunity that he had to strum his guitar, he would strum a local song. And it struck a chord in me to say, look, this must be what they're telling me, you know, sing something that's indigenously. And from then on, with all the criticism, I changed my approach to music. I came back to the indigenously Zambian tunes, Zambian sounds, Zambian messages. And what I know about Zambians is that we are warm people. We fear our God. We love our identity. You know, we love where we come from, our roots, and we love unity. And that's what even President Kaunda used to preach in his songs. If it wasn't about love, it was about God, it was about unity. He also brought to us as artists a sense of pride of being on who we were, what we were as artists. He honored, I remember he honored the Big Gold Six Band. If he was not an artist at heart, maybe those guys would not have been honored. He embraced us at stage functions. I remember I was called to sing for him quite a number of times. And I was always, I don't know what word I can use, maybe honored, because when I would sing, and I would deliberately sing songs from the 70s and from the 80s, and he would get up from his table to dance to the music. And you know, the security is around him, and he would say, no, I want to enjoy the young girl's music. So he always flattered me by calling me a young girl. But I think he has helped shape the Zambian music, because being a landlocked country, we are always tempted to be influenced by all the influences around us. So at some point, we were being influenced by the Congolese music, rumba. At some point, we wanted to be Jamaican. At some point, we wanted to be American. But as I've seen music evolve, now our Zambian artists are taking pride, including myself, to sing in vernacular music, in vernacular language, using more and more sounds from indigenous instruments, incorporating them. Yes, there is the market issue of where you want to make your music sellable. So you may introduce Western instruments and sounds, but predominantly it is Zambian languages that are being used, Zambian dances. So the the spirit of pride, the spirit of patriotism that was put in us by our president, KK, by being an example of loving his music, loving his people, loving his country, is also reflecting in the arts, in us artists. We've seen so many of the artists going that way, and I think we owe that to the decree of more Zambian music playing on the Zambian airs. I think I end there, and I will allow for questions.
Thank you so much, Mama Maureen. That was really wonderful. And we're so grateful that you've taken us through your own history and also the things that you learned, taking the pride, coming back home, and infusing a lot of his style into you're getting more into the indigenous music. That was really powerful. I was just looking at the chat to see if we've got some questions there. Just to let you know that there's just more encouragement there, and somebody wishing you could sing here right now. And I'm sure a lot of us would appreciate that. But I think that we do not have a specific question there for you. I think one question that we had, which was for Kalu, if he's still here, Great Kalu, was specifically to ask what we could learn from the KK11 and bring it into the current scenario. Melissa, let me pass to you and see if you have any question that you'd like to pose again to Maureen before we move on.
Thank you, Moyato, and apologies, I lost my network this time. So I think one question, I guess, to Mama Maureen is that we're seeing a rise and experience of new artists coming along who are now a lot more about advocacy, which you are also very passionate about, and you're using your music to advocate for a number of issues that are coming up in society. So I just wanted for you to speak a few words towards that, because in trying to look at the lessons from KK's legacy, he also used music for advocacy in a way, especially after he left office. So how best can we, begin to nurture music as a way, as a tool of advocacy? Just a few words, Mama Maureen.
Thank you. As I alluded to in the beginning, music has been the medium that has been used from in time immemorial to channel messages across. And what more, especially now in our everyday living, there's so many things going on. And, people switch off from speeches, but music, people will tend to listen to they might enjoy dancing to it, but they will listen to the message. And what better way to send a message but through music? And I would like to encourage all musicians that are using the medium of music to advocate for what they are working with. There's no better medium that beats music, and I just encourage them and I thank them for the work that they are doing.
Thank you so much for taking time. I think we don't have any other question in the chat, and I'll hand over to the moderator, my co-moderator, Moyato, for the next session. Thank you so much, Mama Maureen, for attending.
Thanks for having me.
Great, thank you so much. And we've got Great Kalu, who's just come back on screen. So before we get to Mama Chilufya Kapwepwe, I'll give him a minute to answer the question that we had, and then we'll move on. Over to you, Great Kalu.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stanley. I think that the question was about how you can go back to the KK11. I think that if you remember the model, I always want to say the model of Zambian football. If you look at what Zambia used to be, I think you just have to look position by position. First of all, I think that is for us our identity. I think Zambians normally want to adventurous. They want to see attacking football. We have boys today like Patson Daka, of course, and we have Mwepu. So in them we have almost the call of the team, so you can build a team around them. But what I want to say is that you have to look at Zambia's history when you look at the goalkeepers that Zambia's produced. Zambia's produced Mano Mwape, Kenny Mwape, Efo Chavalas, Kennedy Mwene now. So if you're going to get the goalkeeper, you have to model the Davis Perrys of this world. The goalkeeper is very, very important. So for me, I think, you know, as a trained coach or somebody who wants to analyze football too much, is that we were able to base, even when Heverina was there, we said we want a John Soko type right back. We want a Watakeni type or Eston Mulenga, Ashos Melu guy. We want a Samuel Chomba, you know, with a Debbie Mankinka. We want a Kelvin Mutale. So you see, that is the identity, you know, that you need for a country, because we are starting from way back, you know, when we used to have the Edwin Mbassos of this world, you know, the left back Jack Simbule, or the people who were playing left back and going to Moses Mwala and Brighton Sinyangwe and Yuka Godfrey Chitalu, Alex Tula. So I think that is the model. That is the kind of player that you have to make. You have to try, the coach has to be able to build a team which is going to identify as Zambia, where you're going from back, you know, going forward. You know, Zambia all the time you would have 20, 25 minutes of playing so well. You know, so, and Zambia, because of its dimension, you would find players from everywhere, Western Province, Northwestern, from Luapula, from Eastern. So all these players, Green Buffaloes used to go and pick all these players, Peleka Imana and all these players from far off and bring them together. So that means that Zambia has talent, a football talent, where you'll be able to comb the players, go and find a Fashion Sakala, you know, like the Patson Daka is there, Mwepu, now the boys are presenting us at a very, very high level. So we have to build their talent as young as they are, bring them out. And I think that is a big job for everybody, for the coaches, for everybody in administration to do that and to bring back the KK 11 element.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time with us, and please stay. And there are also some more questions in the chat. If I can give you a very tiny assignment or homework, Great Kalu, which would be my rare privilege to do, please go into the chat. I think there's a question from David, which I think it's about documenting. You mentioned something about documenting, that needs to be done. If you do not mind going in there and answering David, I would appreciate that a lot. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, we're celebrating a life of a giant, as I was saying initially. And there's a lot to cover, and we're really grateful that our speakers are also giving us a lot of insights that most of us may only have had the chance to read. So this is a rare opportunity, and I hope you can stay with us as we discuss with the next few speakers. So I have the rare privilege to speak tonight with I will call her Mama Chilufya Chileshe. She's sorry, not Mama Chilufya Chileshe, that's Mama Chilufya Kapwepwe. She's the daughter of Salome and Simon Mwansa Kapwepwe, who are very well-known freedom fighters in the Kaunda era. She has rendered national service as a democracy and development advocate. She's been a legislator, a member of parliament for Lunte constituency. She's been a diplomat. She worked in the health services delivery system of local government, as well as the corporate sector, and so on. Her achievements are remarkable. So I'm really grateful that we have you joining us tonight. And with you, we would like to discuss the heroes and heroines, those that made Kaunda and those that Kaunda helped to form in terms of our national history. So I would like to start by basically asking you a very quick question. If you look at Zambia's situation at the time of independence, what kinds of heroes and heroines did the country need to give us a clear path forward? And do you think that with the help of Kaunda and the others that were heroes at the time, that we were able to achieve that path with the heroes that we had? Thank you. Over to you. Sorry, you have to unmute.
Okay. Can you hear me now? All right.
We can hear you loud and clear.
All right. Thank you so much for having me on this program. Yes, we have the heroes and heroines and people that I knew growing up. And that is why sometimes I get angry when people claim that they are heroines or they are freedom fighters. because those who call themselves freedom fighters are very near KK's age, and they have to be older than VJ, Mr. Chikwanda, Arabi, because those were the youth when I was growing up. So I would like to ask the Zambians who are masquerading as freedom fighters, please, let's talk about the real freedom fighters. And our problem is that we are not documenting this information. Most of the information that we are getting from Boaka is because somebody has researched to be able to have that kind of information. And that is what we need. So these heroes and heroines, I saw them coming into our house on a daily basis from all the provinces of Zambia. Men and women who are so principled, so committed, and with integrity. These men who are able to sacrifice. I'll give an example of Mr. Munkombwe, Daniel Munkombwe, when we were in ANC, who would sacrifice and even donate cattle in order to raise funds for ANC as a party, because at that time we were in ANC. So these are the men that we want to honor and say, yes, we had a group of men who were going to move us forward after independence. These were men of integrity. These were men who were ready to rule this country. And to them, it was about Zambia. It was not about them. So in terms of leadership, they looked at Zambia as priority to see which direction do we go? How do we develop this country? One of the things that these leaders, the handicap they had was education. They were not graduates from university, but they respected education and they invested in education because they said, let's have free education so that we can have as many Zambians educated as quickly as possible in order for us to rule ourselves. Because at that time, we were depending on expatriates. And I'm sure most of them didn't have the goodwill of this country because they were frustrated, they were angry that we were asking them to go and we wanted to Zambianize. So we wanted our own people to take over. So free education played a great role in bringing most of our men to be able to be educated. A party like UNIP went to the extent of actually sending the youth. I'm not talking about party cadres, I'm talking about youth. People like VJ, people like Chikwanda, people like Arabi, who are even sent outside the country to go and train, to study, because we needed them. These were the youth we needed to depend on to come and carry on, to develop this country. These men were not educated, but they read and educated themselves because they knew they had to rule this country. They knew that they needed to know what it is that needed to be done. The respect for education is something that I really applaud them for. And when you have an educated society, a country can move forward. Even in terms of governance, when you have an educated society, you'll be questioned. People are so aware of what you are doing. So we needed education in this country for our people. They knew also that in order to develop, we needed industries. That was going to create jobs for our people. We had to now go to the rural areas and make sure that all the rural areas, let's come up with industries. You had things like the pineapple, plant. We had coffee plantations, all these things. We were looking at how do you develop the country through agriculture, because then you industrialize the country. And when you do that, you are not dependent on the oppressor who does not even like you. So we were very happy that as a country, we were looking at industrialization. Don't forget that these men and women were learning on the job. It was the first time for them to govern the country. They did make mistakes here and there, but it was the commitment that you could see in these men and women the commitment to this country. And that is why they were able to actually create a path for us to follow. And they went out of the way to go outside the country to look at Zambians who had settled in, outside Zambia, who are educated, who are experts in different fields, invited them to come and help to run this country. So these are the men and women who put us on this path because of their commitment, because of their selflessness, because of their sacrifices.
If I could just have a conversation with you on those points, Mama Kapwepwe, these are very important points you're putting forward. I am noting here you're mentioning they were the real freedom fighters. And I think it would be good if you were to unpack that a little bit. I know that you touched on it. The point that I would like you to spend a bit more time on is you said they were principled, they sacrificed, and they had commitment. Now, those 3 points are really crucial. And I don't think that they just come by out of nowhere. How can we today develop heroes and heroines that would have those 3 principles in them, that would have those 3 characteristics in them? People who are principled, people who can sacrifice, and people who are committed. And I'm asking this question because 50 years from now, should Kaunda, your dad, and others have the privilege to see what's going on, what should they be proud of when they look at the heroes and heroines that Zambia would have created? How do we get these principles in place, the sacrifice and the commitment, and also what would make Kaunda and his colleagues happy if they were able to look back at Zambia in a few years from now? Thank you.
I think it all goes back to leadership. What kind of leadership were these people? When somebody is principled, when somebody is sacrificing, and because they had a common goal. It was not about one person wanting to excel or to be better than the other people. So in terms of leadership, we have a leadership crisis in this country because we need to look at those leaders and what leadership stood for. Now, we've even reduced the presidency to a level where we have lowered standards. In Zambia, anybody can get up and say, I'm going to stand as a president, because we have not maintained those standards in terms of leadership. They were so disciplined that you did not have party cadres also wanting to be part of government. They had structures as a party, as UNIP, where you had all these people, whether they were provincial, secretary, up to ward level. It was a structure and it was party business, and people dealt with that. Then you had the technocrats who were educated, who were sourced from all sorts of part of the world to come and run the country. Then you had now the actual leader, the politician. So there was that division where you could tell these are the people in the party, and you did not mix parties. Sometimes somebody would come and suddenly, he comes into government and to play a role because they realize their limitations. Now, the kind of leadership that we were looking at, that selflessness I'm talking about, that even the self-assessment, you look at yourself and really, should I say I want to be a presidential candidate? I think this country has so many problems that we should not even be looking at the 16 presidential candidates. For God's sake, we have so many problems in this country. What we should be looking at, how do I save my country under anybody? Because if you are a good leader, you can still belong to any of the, even if you had just 4 political parties, it would have been enough. You can save, all that political party. What the ideologies are so different from each other that we have to have so many, political parties. We are wasting time and money instead of concentrating on what is best for Zambia. What kind of leaders should we have for this country? Not mediocre leaders We want leaders that we should look back to and emulate, and we are not doing that.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. I think you're highlighting more and more pieces that I think are really crucial. You are talking here about service as a very crucial component of what a hero or a heroine should be, emulating from the life of Kaunda and the colleagues and his colleagues. One final part that I just wanted to highlight to you and Woaka is there is a question that has come up in the chat. I think it's more or less a comment, and it's about this point of documentation. I think Great Kalu also talked about it, and I just read it as it is. People like you and Woaka should write the full history for us. So where can such documentation and books be found about all these real freedom fighters? So as you answer that question, and before we transition to Grieve, I would like to see if you might want to dwell on any female heroines, any heroines that you know from the time of Kaunda, but also what we should be hoping to see in the future, learning from the life of our late president. So if you could speak to this issue of documentation and any female people that we should be looking to in learning from the past. Thank you.
Yes. We had a lot of foot soldiers, women that organized the party, the unsung heroes of this country. People like Julia Chikamoneka, a woman after my own heart. I knew her personally. She came into our home. This woman was an organizer, but not educated. She was not expecting anything after independence. I remember her saying, the only thing I want is a house like the whites have with a toilet inside. That's all I need. To me, I would be happy that we gained independence. That is the kind of woman who was able to organize other women. The wives of the freedom fighters, these women, like I watched my mother cooking from morning until night as they received all these guests coming into the home, the various freedom fighters. The women that organized, even as the civil servants, maybe as teachers, who were contacts and were able to contribute. The men and women who gave their money, who gave their food to all these freedom fighters, those are the unsung heroes. And we have, as you say, we have not recognized these women. We need to do that. We need to look at who are the women that were there. I can give an example of my mother cycling from Chinsali to Kasama to go and listen to a public meeting in Kasama by Hawiru Mwangankumbula. These were women of caliber. These were women who were so committed. Now, my challenge to us is that we need to start researching and documenting. Secondly, we need to look at the youth. And to me, my challenge, Woaka also brought that out, but I want it to come out. We need the youth to take up leadership. Mm-hmm. Nobody is going to give this leadership to you on a silver plate. We need for you to start emulating. And the only way you can emulate those heroes is by going back to the drawing board and learning about these heroes. There's an organization which has already started of young people who have come together. And we want to get as many young people as possible. To me, if we were to be given 5 years from today, for the next 5 years, you look at credible young people who are willing to sacrifice. And that is what we don't know how to do. Like I used to say, it's the educated ones who are cowards. So it's the educated young people that I'm challenging. You will have to start looking at learning. Knowledge is very important. You need to know where you are coming from. You didn't know your history. You need to know your enemies. Your enemies are not your brothers and sisters like this tribal politics that we are bringing. Your enemies are the oppressors who are still after your resources. And we need the youth to learn that, to know that there were bigger enemy out there, more than their brothers whom they're fighting with. So let's start that group of young people who feel, yes, I'm committed. Yes, I would want to be a leader. So that when now we start talking about 50 years from now, when these people who sacrifice so much look whether they will be in heaven and say, yes, now we have a leadership which is even more revolutionary than what we were. These are the kind of leaders that we need, and we can do it. Whether you are in the diaspora, whether you are in Zambia, this is something that can be done, but you need knowledge and you need to organize yourselves. How do you access that knowledge? People like Oaka is a person that has so much knowledge, and if he goes, that knowledge goes with him. There are so many Zambians who are willing to give you that knowledge, but you need to organize yourselves as a youth. And that's where we can move forward.
Well, that's a fountain of wisdom. One of our colleagues usually says that in most of our communities, when an old man or old woman dies, it's like burning a library, because all the information that they have and the knowledge they have goes with them. And I think you're putting forward a challenge here to the young people, the learned young people, but basically everyone, that let's document this information and let's learn the sacrifice, the principle, the commitment, the service, and be of service to our nation. I'm really grateful that you gave us this opportunity to speak with you. There are more comments in the chat. I'm not sure whether you would be able to, but I would encourage you just to see some of the comments that are in there in case you wanted to offer more insights. I will move on now to a young man. And since you gave us this very big challenge for the young people to rise to the occasion, I'm really happy to see that we'll be speaking to a renowned young scholar who will be speaking to us about KKnomics or Kaundanomics, and basically we're going to walk back through the life of this great man from an economic perspective. And I'm excited to introduce to all of you Dr. Grieve Chelwa, who is a postdoctoral fellow at the Institute on Race and Political Economy at the New School, where he leads on inclusive economic rights. Dr. Chelwa has written a lot about different topics, and I will not go into the details, but I hope you will find this next set of the conversation as exciting as I know it will be. Grieve, good evening.
Good evening, Muyatwa, and all other colleagues and the elders who've spoken before me, those who speak after me, and just basically everybody who's been involved in putting this together.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Grieve. And I think you heard the challenge from Mama Chilufya, where she's calling the young people to rise to the occasion. Now, one of the things that actually she talked about, which I would like to maybe get started with, is she said that there were very few people who were educated at the time of independence. I think the numbers say that there were possibly roughly about 100 graduates at the time of independence. So that's really a handful. Universities now churn out people with degrees in thousands. So we're talking about 100 people here at the time of independence. So there were a lot of challenges that when Zambia was getting independence, there were a lot of challenges that Kaunda and his comrades faced at the time. So I would like you to situate us in sort of this context of the independence time. What were the economic challenges that were there? You have written or talked about Kaundanomics. I know that recently somebody referred to you as an economist who also knows history. So would you bundle up this economics of the time, 1964, and the history of what was happening around the political economy then? Over to you.
Thank you, Muyatwa, for that question. And certainly it's an honor for me to speak on this panel of very distinguished men and women whom I look up to a lot. I think it's very important, first of all, to understand, most people don't know this, but from 1890 up until 1964, Zambia was effectively a British colony. That is 74 years, right? We were much longer a British colony than we've been an independent country. Right, so it is important to understand that. Basically, what it means when you're a British colony, it means that the economy works for the colonizing country, the mother country, which is in this case was Britain, right? So our economy was organized precisely along the lines of enriching Britain, right? Enriching the colonial master. So that is the economy that Dr. Kenneth Kaunda and his cabinet and his administrators inherited. And it is not surprising that we only had 100 university graduates at independence. I've seen a statistic that says only 0.5% of our population had a primary school qualification, had finished primary school, precisely because the economy was mainly to facilitate extraction. And anybody who was going to be educated was to be educated to participate in that facilitation of extraction. So the task for Dr. KK and his comrades was to overturn the status quo, was to overturn an economy that was built to advantage people in Britain, advantage also the white colonial administrators in Northern Rhodesia. That was the challenge. So the challenge was for them to overturn the state of affairs. And to my mind, they were quite successful in that particular endeavor.
Thank you so much, Grieve. And I think it's good to know sort of this point you're making that for a much longer time of our history, we were actually saving, and it was more an externalized sort of situation. Now, what exactly did Kaunda do to sort of shift the dynamics, to shift the paradigm at about independence, to begin to sort of look inward and help them move the economy for the Zambian, for the people who were looking for education, rural industrialization, as Mama Kapwepo was talking about, agriculture and several other things at the time?
Thanks for that question. It's actually very interesting when you study policy making under the Kaunda era. He was a very patient man, you know. So again, I say this as somebody who grew up, who was born in the Kaunda, in the latter periods of the Kaunda era, who never really met him, but one that I've studied quite closely. He was a very patient man insofar as the formulation of economic policy was concerned. So at independence, Kaunda believed that political independence was enough. To my mind, he believed and esteemed that political independence is enough to possibly deliver economic independence. And he gave the structure of the economy then a chance to prove itself. So basically the economy at that time was organized along what I can call broadly free market capitalist lines. So he thought the mines, which were in the hands of Anglo-American and American metal climax, would participate in economic development. He also thought that maybe the manufacturing sector at that time, which was in the hands of whites, capitalist whites would participate in economic development. But very early on, it dawned on him and his leadership team that actually that wasn't happening, right? It dawned on him that basically what is happening is the mines began to externalize even much more of their profits than before independence, which is not surprising because before independence, they saw themselves as part of this British Empire. So immediately after independence, the mines began to externalize even much more of their profits. They stopped reinvesting their profits in developing mining capacity. The banking sector, which was in the hands of a white capitalist class, did not advance credit, did not advance loans to the Black majority population, and so on and so forth. Mama Chilusha Kapwepo talked about Zambianization. I mean, it dawned on Kaunda and his team that if you look around the commanding heights of the economy, the managerial class is all white. If there's a famous anecdote that has been told, I can't remember the source of this anecdote, but basically Kaunda visits one of the mining companies just after independence. He looks around, he doesn't see any Zambians. He asks the white mine owners, when can we expect to see Zambians taking up positions of leadership in this mine? And the white owners look at Kaunda with a straight face and they say, Your Excellency, not before the year 2003. Because we still have to grow the capacity of the Blacks, we have to grow it. So basically it dawned on him very early on that this experiment of allowing the free market capitalist economy to continue wasn't helping. So in 1968 and 69, he announces some quite seismic reforms. In 1968, it's the Mulungushi reforms. In 1969, the Matero Declaration, which then becomes the Matero reforms. And basically these reforms are meant at nationalizing the mines, getting the mines out of the hands of the minority white capitalist class and putting the commanding rights of the economy into the hands of the Zambian people. The Zambian state. So afterwards, 80% of the Zambian economy is now in the hands of Zambian people, and then we can control our destiny. And basically the mines then begin, as opposed to status before where they're externalizing all their profits, we can now return those profits and we can now begin to spend on education, on social spending, and so on and so forth. So the mines begin to fund a cradle to the grave type of welfare system. Many of us know the stories. Our parents, my generation born in the 80s, our parents went to school for free. My dad, who was born in a very, very rural part of Zambia, right? The odds of him getting to university were much higher in the Kaunda days than the odds are for somebody today who's born in a very, very rural part of the country. So social mobility increased, right? So those kinds of things. So basically, to my mind, this is basically what Kaunda did. It took the reins of the commanding heights of the economy, transferred it into the hands of the Zambian people, and that began to fund an ambitious infrastructure development program, an ambitious social spending program, and et cetera, and also job creation, industrialization, which Mama Chilufya Kapwepwe spoke about, that kind of thing. And there's a lot of evidence that shows, for example, our manufacturing capacity was much higher then than it is today. I mean, we've heard the stories, right? Luangwa bicycle plant in Eastern Province, Mansa batteries, Livingston car assembly, right? These ideas, by the way, which Kaunda had, have come back into fashion now. Even go to the World Bank and the IMF, they're telling us about the importance of industrialization. So clearly Kaunda and his colleagues were far ahead of their history. And they achieved this within a very short space of time. We should never forget historical dimension there. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Grieve. And I did hear the story of, I think you told this in one of the podcasts that I recently listened to, the story of your dad from a Kato head to going to university and really just sort of having that path, which is very difficult to imagine, but actually being possible in that situation. And this is something that I think most of our parents really appreciate these opportunities that were given to them. So I'd like to, as we sort of get to the close of this discussion with you, if you could reflect on a few causes, economic causes that Kaunda picked on, that Dr. Kenneth Kaunda picked on even after his presidency. And I will share one quick thing with you. I met him only once, and I feel that I was very privileged, and I also felt that it was enough because, I mean, I would not expect to meet him every day, right? So when I met him, it was, we were campaigning for debt cancellation, and we had reached a HIPC completion point. Zambia's debt had come down significantly, and there was still some work to be done in terms of finishing the work around debt, in terms of legislation, making sure there's responsible lending and responsible borrowing. And we asked him to be part of this cause. He did not ask a question. He accepted. And he recorded a video, and he participated in this campaign that we called Finish the Work on Debt campaign. So what other causes do you see him picking up after his presidency? And what do that tell us about his view in terms of what we should be focusing on economically going forward? Thank you.
Thanks so much for that question, Moyatwa. I think I was unaware of his role that you've just shared with us about his role in trying to push for debt cancellation. My sense is that he had much less economic causes post-independence than he had other sorts of social and health causes. But the one that you bring up is rather interesting, and I'm not surprised that he jumped at the opportunity to participate in this exercise of pushing for debt cancellation. And that's because I think Kaunda, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, understood that you cannot really have genuine independence without economic independence. And that is what debt does, right? Debt really binds you, to use the words of Mama Chilufya Kapwepwe, to dance the tune of the oppressor, all right? Precisely, and I think he understood that. He understood that we needed to get this yoke of debt off our necks so that to be meaningfully free. And we see that now in this kind of current environment where our debt stock is again going up, we're again dancing to the tune of those who are sort of outside. So I'm not surprised that Dr. KK really jumped at the opportunity to participate in the debt cancellation initiative, precisely because he understood that, and this I think he learned from between 1964 and 1968, that you can have political independence, but if you have economic dependence, if you're dependent economically, then it is as if you have not gotten you haven't gotten freedom. So I think I'm not surprised that he did that. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Grieve. And I think you're ending us on a note of economic emancipation, which is crucial as well. I'll give you a minute in case you've got any other sort of economic insights in terms of our lessons from Dr. KK economically, and perhaps what we need to be thinking about in terms of the economy, picking lessons from him, and then we'll move on.
Thank you. I think I'll just two things very quickly. One is a myth I need to dispel based on my own research. Often when we look at the economy in the KK days and the dismal performance of the economy, especially in the latter part of his reign, say in the 1980s, we often ascribe that to completely mismanagement on the part of him and his team. There's some truth in that. But to my mind, I think the biggest explanatory variable of that kind of performance is really the performance of the price of copper. And I think, and then really what happens is that after we nationalize the copper mines, the copper price begins a 3-decade decline. It declines in the 70s, declines in the 80s. And I think this is what really set them sort of into disequilibrium. That really messed them up. And the only lesson that I say we could pick from there is that they believed that it would recover, right? They believed that it would recover. And they were advised by people outside that it would recover. These things always recover, but it never did, right? So that's sort of not realizing early enough that we needed to change course and maybe diversify. I think that's one lesson I can say. Basically, the last thing I'll say is what else can we pick from KK? The importance of industrialization as a means to economic development. This is what he started, called industrial policy. Funny enough, surprise, surprise, it's back now. Right, this idea of industrial policy is back now. It's very fashionable. Even in the IMF and World Bank, who told us in 1990 that you don't need to get the state involved in the economy, just let the market miraculously deliver industrialization. So this we have to learn. We have to go back to the KK days, learn the good lessons, learn the bad lessons, but I think understand this importance of economic independence, economic emancipation, depending on yourselves. Right now, we saw all of us, the riots in South Africa, and we panicked. We said, oh my God, if those things continue, we're going to starve because our shelves are filled with South African produce. So we really need to understand this idea of economic emancipation. I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Great, great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Always good to speak with you. I hope that Mama Kapwepwe thinks that there is hope after hearing such a young man bring up these really important points. I think you do bring us to a crucial point about economic emancipation, but also looking at industrial policy and also the role of the state. I've heard say that it has got more feelings and this can hopefully editing of how to bring everybody up. So great, big thanks to you, Grieve. We're going to move on, and I will ask my colleague Melissa just to come back up onto the floor as we move on to the next phase of the program.
Thank you so much, Muyatwa. I'm learning so much from the panel of distinguished speakers that are lined up tonight, and really grateful that they are bringing in so many insights from really a wide range of topics to ensure that we are sort of learning from the legacy and life of the Kaunda era. And the next speaker that we have is another distinguished expert in his own right, a state counsel, a once upon a time Solicitor General, who's going to speak to servitude and leadership, some things that have really threads that have come through the talks of the other speakers, and how best can we begin to go back to inculcate the idea of servitude and getting the right leadership into systems of governance. So I'll call upon Mr. Musa Mwenya, please. Mr. Musa Mwenya, please welcome to this discussion. And just in this conversation, as we begin our conversation in regards to servitude and leadership, from your perspective, when you hear servitude and leadership, I mean, what kind of things ring and come to mind when you hear about servitude and leadership, especially given the Kaunda era context and where we are today in Zambia?
Let me start by thanking you for organizing this discussion. To all the organizers, congratulations for this very well put together discussion, and, for helping us honor a truly great man. And I think servitude and leadership, coming to your topic, I must say, before I get into the discussion, that there's both an advantage and a disadvantage to speaking at this time. The disadvantage is that everyone is we are in the graveyard session, as I know it, and people are struggling to stay awake. So I'll try to keep my comments to a minimum. But the advantage is that I've had several very eminent and well-researched speakers before me. What that may entail is that they have done most of the job for myself. I don't think we need to separate the two words, leadership and servitude. I think we can speak of them in one word, servant leadership. And that is exactly what memories of late President Kaunda evoke in me, the thought of servant leadership, integrity in practice, at least in economic management. We knew that in the running of the affairs of the country at that time, that whatever mistakes that Dr. Kaunda and his team of leaders made, they were honest mistakes. Now that's important. It's very, very important, because what we see this day and age in modern Africa, Zambia in particular, is that some mistakes that we see, economic mistakes that we see in the management of national affairs, are not honest mistakes, but they are informed by corruption and personal gain. So servant leadership from that generation, and Dr. Kaunda was in fact the last in that generation of servant leaders who were studious, they read, they spent time investing in reading. And not only did they read, but they wrote and they inspired. We've lost that. We've lost that very important attribute in leaders who actually spend time developing thought leadership. We don't have that. You see Dr. Kaunda and his contemporaries in the late people like Eduardo Mondlane, Amilcar Cabral, Julius Nyerere, Leopold Senghor, and all that crop of leaders who led at that time in Africa. They inspired in the right direction. But now what we see in modern African setting, modern Zambian setting, is leaders who are obsessed with displaying wealth. If you see any public servant posting on Facebook, many times you stand in front of a luxurious car, or they'll be at parties flying Rolexes and so on. That is not what Dr. Kaunda and the crop of leaders that he led at that time epitomized. And so for me, when I think of servant leadership, I think of Dr. Kaunda and his colleagues who did not pile up money in personal treasuries, transference from the state into their coffers, but they served, at least in the economic area, with honesty and distinction. And they made honest mistakes, not mistakes driven by corruption.
Thank you. So you've touched on quite an aspect that I think in that era was referred to as the leadership code. I mean, Kaunda and his colleagues set up a code of in which that the leaders of that time needed to abide by, which ensured that there was no extravagance for lack of a better word, in terms of you needed to account for, quote unquote, the sudden riches that you had, that you were, in fact, those leaders didn't even have sudden riches because there was a led procedure and there was a leadership code. So I just want you to speak to that, because I think to a certain extent, having lost that kind of code amongst our leaders, especially speaking to the current crop of leadership, we seem to also have had an erosion of systems of governance and more or less institutions that are rooted on a particular modus operandi. So I just want you to expand and unpack for us how best can we ensure that we bring back some form of leadership code in the current dispensation and ensure that our systems of governance and institutions of governance are grounded so that they can be checks and balances in the process.
Right. Let me start by saying, you know, the United Nations Development Program report of 2008 on tackling corruption recognized that corruption undermines democratic institutions, but it also retards economic development and contributes to weakening state institutions. Now, from my reading of the way Dr. Kaunda and his team led at that time, they were fully aware of this. Because when you allow corruption to permeate all the institutions of government, and when every decision you make in the advancement of economic activity in your country is informed not by national interest, but by the interests of those who preside over the resources of the nation, you can't do much to develop the nation. And that is why you see in some African countries, I dare say, mine included, the country that Dr. Kaunda and his crop of leaders worked for, got independence for, you see the disparity between the leaders and those who are led in income is huge. KK and his team took their children to the schools in their country, in Zambia. KK died in a Zambian hospital. He attended Zambian hospitals all the time. He had faith in the institutions he built and the personnel he trained. We don't see that. Now, coming specifically to your question, in 1973, the leadership code was enacted by the Kaunda government. And you see, for me, the timing of the enactment of the leadership code could have been informed by the lessons that Dr. Kaunda had learned over the 9 years he had presided over national affairs up to that time. Because he had been in power for 9 years, there was no leadership code, and there must be a lesson that was learned in this period. And the leadership code made it very clear, and I'm on record, perhaps rightly or wrongly, as having said that when you go into national service, you then must not be preoccupied with business. If business is your calling and passion, do business. But many, many times the interests of business and public service conflict. And so having public servants who are actively involved in businesses usually creates these conflicts that we have seen in the modern African state and Zambia in particular. So they enacted the leadership code in 1973 that made it very clear that people in public service cannot conduct business. Okay, also it restricted the acquisition of land and so many other areas. Well, it may have been unpopular at some point towards the end of that era, but the idea that people who serve the public, people who are working in national service must concentrate on the interests of the nation rather than the public pocket is very important, and it applies even today. You may be aware that in 1976, Dr. Kaunda established the Special Investigation Team on Economy and Trade, seated again to deal with economic crimes, and enacted the first Anti-Corruption Act in 1980, set up the Anti-Corruption Commission that we have here now, then. And for me, that shows a tangible commitment where there was nothing. In a time that African leaders had a lot of power, he could have abused his position economically, financially, like our northern neighbor Mobutu Sese Seko, who made the National Treasury his private purse, and several others on the African continent. But he chose to serve the people. You know that Dr. Kaunda was investigated when he left power. Scotland Yard came here. They found nothing. So when we say that this man saved the country without personal enrichment, we speak from authority. He led with integrity in financial affairs, and there are lessons to be learned by us. Now, did Dr. Kaunda die a pauper? Did he die rejected? No, he died a hero. He lived post-retirement only on the goodwill of people who knew his commitment to the nation and his level of patriotism. Our current leaders in Africa, leaders in Zambia, can learn something from this, that there is life beyond government, and that people who lead with distinction are never lonely post their service in government. Their integrity and status feeds them and keeps them. And those are lessons that are there for me, they are there for national leaders in Africa, and they are there for Zambian leaders. And those of us, everyone, right now we're in campaign election season, who aspire to leadership can learn something from that generation of leaders who led with distinction.
Yeah, so I'll just speak on to this last point that you've raised, considering the time that we're in now, rallying up to, I mean, it's less than 30 days leading up to a general election. So in thinking on how best can we, and when I mean we, I mean as a collective, as a Zambian body, whether in the diaspora or physically in Zambia, but even individually, how do we begin to see what the right servitude leader needs to be picked? How, I mean, what characteristics should we be looking out for? And is there even such a thing as the right leadership? And is there, I mean, of course, you can name so many examples on people who get into power and suddenly they turn from being blue to being black. But I mean, what's your message to us leading up to the pause, and how best can we begin to see these traits that somebody is not really there for the people, and are there even traits that one can pick up to ensure that we are picking the right leadership?
It will take a lot. It will take a lot to change the current body politic and to elevate the level of debate, to move our politics from politics that are based simply on who dances the most and what song is playing for the moment, to discussing tangible issues. I think for me, personally, track record is everything. You cannot pick me to preside over something, anything, whether it's a council chairmanship, to be a councillor or anything, if I don't have a track record. How am I telling you that I'll improve your lot when I haven't done anything to show that I can manage this? And it's easy to see track record. It's easy to see the traits in people. And that's why I am happy that we have social media sometimes now, there's a bit more information flowing back and forth in which we can analyze and see track records in financial management. And I have been on record myself to say that you must ask difficult questions. I served as Solicitor General in this country. I served as Attorney General. What is wrong with you, Melissa, and your team asking me, how come you are driving this kind of car? You have so many properties. How did you get them? We must, as Zambians, begin to ask those questions. And us who have served in these public offices must not shy away from answering. And we must set a gold standard that those who are not willing to lead an open life should not aspire or get anywhere near public service, at least in financial matters. Because that's the only way we can protect the national peace. That is the only way we can truly aspire to the values that people like Dr. Kaunda and his team aspire to. Integrity in national service. But that in the current setting, wherever you go, we are hearing state capture, and I think Wo Aka referred to it, but we're hearing state capture commissions in several African countries and so on. And this word now, state capture, has become a term of art, and particularly because it's happening. And in certain instances, we are not having the state being captured by criminal elements, but we're having criminal elements actually being the state. And that is worrying. And so the only way, in my estimation, is to increase scrutiny, to ask the critical questions. Because I served as Solicitor General, I served as Attorney General, I held a public position. Tomorrow I'll stand as the president somewhere. You have to check, how did I serve as Attorney General? How did I serve and how did I accumulate wealth? And you should ask me 3 questions. And I've said lifestyle audits starting with me as a former public officer. Ask me 3 questions. How did you get what you got? Number 1, okay? And then you ask me the before and after. Finally, if I tell you that I got this in a particular way, give you my explanation, and I tell you I was running a successful business, ask how much tax I paid. Because if you made $1 million, you must have paid $160,000 as VAT at least. So it is very easy to deal with this with the right questions. But we have gone to a level where we have desensitized ourselves and treated corruption as okay. Instead of considering the right heroes, those who have served with distinction and have had no questions about corruption like Wo Aka there, we elevate those who have acquired wealth illicitly and elevate them to the position of heroes. And our young people are now aspiring to be entrepreneurs. I have the indignity of driving a big car. And whenever you pass through any bus stop or market in this country, a party symbol is waved at you. What does that mean? We have reached a place where, unlike the KKs who wore safari suits and not the latest French designs, okay? And they didn't drive the latest fancy cars at that time. Today, to be a person who drives a luxurious car is tied directly to a party position. So we are a nation where not the business people flash money and therefore inspire people, the young people, to business and productivity that enhances our country, but we are inspiring people to become millionaires in public service. And what that means essentially is we are creating a whole cadre of parasites that fit off the state treasury and state connections and don't create any wealth at all. And that is not an ideal position for a nation like ours.
Yeah. So I'll pick a question from the attendees, because I think this is very tied to what you've said, and it's linked a lot to having strong institutions of governance and really robust systems that would ensure that there's checks and balances. So Regina Mukondola asks, how do you criticize someone who has the power to arrest you, who can end your livelihood? And we see a lot of this. It's difficult to have these difficult conversations because you know your job is pegged on it, your livelihood is pegged on it. One doesn't have the luxury that, for instance, Wo Aka and Madam Kapwepwe actually resigned their positions because they began to see all this corruption happening. And so today, how do we ensure that we are beginning to develop that mindset that says, I will stand for what I stand for and value the beliefs I have, and can say no because I need to protect my integrity? So how does one begin to do that?
Well, it boils down to exactly what Madam Kapwepwe said. The cowardice of the educated. That is a problem that we have. And I'm telling you, for as long as we don't have a questioning population, and I hazard to say that it benefits despots to keep people uneducated and unempowered. But a questioning population, which we had even traditionally, those who have studied our African traditional societies will tell you that even that time when kings and queens in Africa could cut off the head of a person that the mayor mentioned, we used to have people insulting them through song to convey displeasure. That's an African thing. So power or not, we must find a way to criticize. And you know what? True statesmen and leaders who are skilled and experienced will know that criticism saves you from impending calamity, because the ending is always bad. Today, we are celebrating this great man. Today, we are talking about the legacy of Dr. Kaunda. Why? I'll tell you, it is because of his financial integrity. If this man was a Mobutu Sese Seko who had billions of dollars in his accounts, I'll tell you something, Melissa, I would not have come onto this program. But his integrity is the reason we are talking about him. And his legacy in death, I think, will be greater than in life. Why? Because of his integrity. And so when we criticize leaders, it's never, well, for some of us, it's not out of hatred or malice, but leaders who listen to criticism end up very well. Their legacy is solid, and they are given time to correct any wrongs. If you criticize me for something I have done in the management of my office, and I'm able to correct it 4 years ahead of time, if I listen, then I'm able to fix that legacy and do something about it. But leaders who are intransigent, and this is the history of the African continent or any other place, you may look like you are getting ahead for the time being. The ending is always bad. Today we are talking to Dr. Kaunda's grandchild on this program. She is free to talk to us. She's talking about his legacy, and we are interacting like this. Do you think that is said of Mobutu's grandchildren? And that is the importance of us criticizing these leaders, because legacy is about what you leave to your children and your children's children. And all that the leaders of now will leave is their names. Now the question is, in financial management, and where it mattered to do the greatest for your own people, did your name live on to speak of that legacy? And I think we have to be very clear in telling our leaders exactly what we think in a respectful way, of course. But where diplomacy conflicts with the clarity, I choose clarity all the time.
Thank you so very much. I mean, it's important to ensure that we have platforms that allow for such discourse, difficult conversations, words that need to be said and heard. It's very important, and I'm very grateful that you are actually bringing a lot of these things to light, because they speak a lot to what the Kaunda era was. And so in looking forward, just one last question, in looking forward, I mean, what are the critical elements that we can more or less, if we had a magic wand, transpose from that era, taking forward into the Zambia that we need?
Well, I think what we need, again, to be simplistic in my approach, is to look at servant leadership. Let me speak of myself, okay? Let me share. A lot of times, and I think I've seen one question on being asked on what we did I did when I was in government, and that's a good question, which people should be asking. What did you do? And I think for me, it's emulating their integrity. And as its populace, being questioning, asking the questions. I remember, I just told you that Dr. Kaunda's team enacted the 1980 Anti-Corruption Act and set up the SEC. When I was sworn in December 2011, we got to work and realized, I mean, lessons from the past, that fighting corruption is about taking tangible steps. And tangible steps are given usually in enactments and actual pronouncements. Now, we enacted the Anti-Corruption Act 2012, which brought back the abuse of authority clause, and through several measures, including making operational the FIC, the Financial Intelligence Center, which, by the way, CITED could have been a crude form of that back in 1976. But now you have the Financial Intelligence Center, and the world, then a lot of people criticize CITED that Dr. Kaunda set up. But in the modern setting, you see that financial intelligence centers, intelligence agencies that bring information about these financial issues, money laundering, is now standard practice internationally. And we operationalized the Financial Intelligence Center and gave it teeth. And you see these reports coming out now that showed that within 8 years, we had $800 million in suspicious transactions. We need that openness. In addition to that, through several measures, including tangible steps, we increased, you can check your figures, I'm glad there are academicians here, the Corruption Perception Index, TIZ Corruption Perception Index, to the highest it's ever been. In 2012, it rose to 37, and 2013 and 2014, it rose to 38. Now, that is lessons from the past. Lessons from people like Dr. Kaunda and his team, the enactments they made, the advice we gave the then president who served us to make tangible pronouncements. One or two missteps, admittedly, there were one or two mistakes made, but always when he took the podium, he said, I'm allergic to corruption. Messaging is very important from leaders. So we saw that the CPI index, up to now, it's never been beaten. We are down to about 32 now, or 33. It was 38 when some of us left power, so left government. So I think we have a lot to learn from that crop of leaders. They made tangible steps towards fighting corruption. They had integrity in practice, and they were not afraid of being questioned. Dr. Kaunda himself did not flee this country. When the Scotland Yards came, he said, investigate me. There were investigators checked his books and so on, and the man was clean. The lesson there is we shouldn't be afraid of scrutiny. A person like me shouldn't be afraid to be asked, how do you have what you have when you were in government, what about this, what about that? I should be able to explain. And that transparency should go throughout our state institutions, because when you are sent to public office, you are a public servant. And that brings us right back to servant leadership. We should serve the people of this country, the people of this continent, in the very same way that our founding fathers served the people of this country and increased, as has already been said, from the 100 graduates that were there at independence and only 6,000 people or so who had attained at least 2 years of secondary education to the many, many universities we have now. I was a beneficiary of free education because of the sacrifices that they made. A lot of the people who are prominent now will tell you, oh, I went to school with Ken Opanji Kaunda, or I went to school with this leader's child, and so on, because the leaders built institutions and trusted those institutions. I think those are great lessons that we can pick from that generation of leaders.
Thank you so very much for unpacking such a fantastic topic that really speaks to the era that the Kaunda unique dispensation sort of speaks to. And I think the take-home message here is, let's look for people with servitude characteristics and attributes, national interests, national service, national values that we can pick from and ensure that we allow them to be accountable, that the boys in our courts, and that we should ask them. And it should be about us having the power to ask those, even though they will be difficult questions or difficult conversations. Thank you so very much for giving us your time and really talking to this great topic in regards to servant leadership. So I'll invite my co-moderator, Muyatwa. Thank you. So I'll hand over to you, Muyatwa, to take us through the next events in the program.
Thank you so much, Melissa, and ladies and gentlemen, we are getting now to our last speaker before we sort of begin the closure of this conversation. And it is indeed a privilege for us tonight to speak with Dr. Sishiwa Sishiwa, and for us to speak about Dr. Kaunda's political life. And I think that some of the conversations might have also have come to life in this discussion. But could we have Dr. Sishiwa on the screen, please? And then we'll get the discussion going, and then we should be on our way towards closure so that you could go about your business. Okay, just 1 second. Okay, do we have Sishiwa? Okay, there he is.
Yes, thank you.
Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Paddy.
Hello, and if you could, I can't see you. I'm not sure everybody can see you.
Tech team, can we spotlight him? Brilliant.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So we really appreciate your time, and I know it's late in the night, so thank you for your patience. We wanted to think through the Kaunda era, and yeah, I mean, you've read his political life, you've studied it very well, and you're right about his political life as well, and his political ideology and identity. So we wanted you to sort of situate us in his political career. What were some of the sort of the political landmines that he had to deal with? What were his ways in terms of leadership of managing some of those very serious and difficult political challenges, both at home and internationally? Thank you.
Thank you so much for organizing this event. I do think that the relevance of death lies on its impact on those that live. So in having this kind of interactions, we are not really mourning Dr. Kaunda, we are celebrating his life, particularly in relation to what can we learn from his his impactful life. For somebody who lived, for 90 years, over 90 years, it's fair to say that there are huge lessons that cannot be unpacked in a limited time. So what I wanted to do today was just to share about 7 lessons for Zambians that I think we can learn from President Kaunda's political career. And I wanted to organize that alongside what the various speakers have spoken, to simply bring it all together around the decades where we can say, what do we learn from Kaunda in the 1930s and 1940s? What do we learn from President Kaunda in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, 80s, 90s, and then I end with the 2000s and 2010s. And the first lesson from the 1930s and 1940s decade, which I think we can learn from President Kaunda, is the importance of family and community. By community here, I mean churches and schools. But when you include family, you have 3 critical institutions that are very central to the development of an individual at the formative stage of their life. Kaunda was born from missionary parents. And by that accident of birth, he had an opportunity to go to school. This is something that many Zambians can relate to. There are many people who would like to have an education, for example, but who are condemned to a life on the margins, virtually because they are born from parents who can't afford it. And what you see Kaunda doing in many ways when he comes to power, he and his friends do, is to extend opportunity to those people on the margins, partly informed by his own life experiences. So family is very important because Zambia hasn't changed much today. In fact, if anything, we have gotten worse. Under the colonial era, you had a number of religious institutions, particularly churches, who were providing this kind of opportunities. And I think this is a point that also deserves acknowledgement, that churches in Zambia have continued to complement the state's role in providing services such as education. And Kaunda and a couple of other nationalist figures were some of the earliest beneficiaries of that, who went on to have a huge impact on the national stage. But you can trace that to the opportunity that he had, virtually because of the family in which he was born to. So we, the Zambians of today, even as we continue, we have to make sure that the values that we want to see in our leaders start at the family level, because that's a very important unit. You cannot expect to have good leaders at the national level if the family is rotten to the core. But it's also important to talk about churches and schools. Kaunda is shaped in terms of his value system, not just by the family, but the schools he goes to, the religious institutions he attended, but also the wider community in which he was born. We often talk about leaders in a vacuum. We remove them from their community. If you have a community that does not uphold values, it's unfair for us to expect ourselves to produce, leaders. But sometimes we hear people say, well, when are we going to have leaders like Kaunda, like Nyerere, It's important to always remember that we produce ourselves in terms of leadership that we get. So Kaunda was not an outlier. It was part of that wider community that really appreciated the importance of values and did much to nurture them. That's the first lesson that we get from Kaunda when he goes to school in the 1930s, 1940s. The second lesson is the need for the educated Zambians to get involved in politics. This is a lesson from the 1950s, because Kaunda, after he finishes his school, he joins politics in 1953, becoming organizing national secretary of the African National Congress led by Herman Kumbula. Now, what you see today is something that very disappointing, in the sense that we leave politics to the less educated, and I use the word educated here deliberately to mean not just formal education, but also a kind of education that is matched with attendant values that are essential to public service. That generation of Kaunda, what they lacked in education, and that's not that wasn't because they didn't want to go to school. For many of the people who were in cabinet with Kaunda, they never had higher education like we have now. We have so many people with degrees. But what they lacked in education, they had in values. It's almost a contradiction today that we have so many educated Zambians, some of them actually finding themselves in leadership positions, but you find a situation where the value system has collapsed. But also you find a situation where increasingly what the kind of people we see who are stepping up to take national positions, political positions, are the least capable. The most ignorant of us are stepping forward to lead. Why? Because the educated are basically happy to sit back and complain. We need to take a hard look at the character structure and psychology of our educated class in Zambia today. Why does this class, this educated class of Zambians, knowing so well the weaknesses and backwardness of those who lead us, and fully aware of the sorry state of the mass of many of our people, why do they do virtually nothing about both the conditions of our life and leadership? Are we such a parasitic, educated middle class on our national poverty that we are completely paralyzed and are incapable, of the necessary and essential political activity that is required to overturn our national pride to a better state? Mama Kapwepwe spoke about this idea, which Sata also emphasized, we are cowards. We, the educated Zambians, are cowards. We are talkers rather than doers. We have dreams rather than visions. We are an impotent political social class, incapable of fulfilling its historical and social responsibility. We always, blame others for our sorry state of affairs in Zambia. Party politicians, illiterate population, backward rural dwellers, always running away from the answer to our problems, which is all the time staring us straight into our eyes, using our eyes. It's us. So the educated Zambians should learn an example from Kaunda. He was a teacher. He was getting a good salary. He abandoned that job to join mainstream politics. And look, today we are talking about him and his impact on leadership. What we often forget is that he had, at that time, it was primary education, but it was very sufficient because it was one that was not available for many. And we should not underplay the importance of education. Today's world is very complex. You cannot be led by competent and ignorant leaders, however confident they may appear to be. But education alone is not important. You also need values, a value system that is rooted in courage, compassion, love for fellow human beings, moral force of character, integrity, genuine humility, honesty, a predilection for consultation, consensus building, communication, cooperation, active listening, and the selfless pursuit of the public good, not what we see increasingly now, the selfish striving for personal gain. It is hardly possible to look at today's leaders in Zambia without being struck by the calamity of the absence of this kind of leadership that we once had at one time. Kaunda was part of that rare group of public leaders who conduct themselves with dignity, grace, and within the context of a value system at whose center is the obligation to only serve the country, not the self, as Musa Mwenye mentioned. The currency was values, not wealth accumulation. And I've been reading some of Kaunda's works, including Letters to My Children, for example, and his thoughts on humanism. I do think that his principles of humanism are relevant in the present context, perhaps more so now than ever before. I would say that one of his major achievements was building an ideology an ideology for nationhood that was underpinned by respect for one another's humanity. He called it humanism. And I think we should reflect on this and seek to reinforce it, because what I see increasingly is the disheartening erosion of this very principle. And much of the damage in relation to when the value system in Zambia collapsed took place under the president of Kaunda's successor in the 1990s. In that period, between 1991 and 2001, corruption thrived, values were placed on the market, and personal acquisition for material wealth became entrenched as an important social value and the accepted standard in terms of which a person was judged by society as a success, regardless of how that wealth was accumulated. So that's a major issue we learned from Kaunda, to say the educated have to step forward, but it's not enough to be educated. We must also nurture values and try to codify this. And that's really what we learned from Kaunda in the 1950s. In the 1960s, what we learned, the development is that development means investing in people's health and education. And a number of speakers before me have already spoken about this. It's not the skyscrapers you see. It's not the bridges. It's not the roads. Yes, these are important, but at the center of development should be people's health. That means in building health facilities, but stocking these with medicine and staffing them with qualified medical personnel. Once upon a time, we had a health system and a network of provincial hospitals in Zambia that, although not without their problems, at least functioned and could provide a range of basic medical services. Kaunda's government built a hospital literally in each district of the country. But you also had those major provincial hospitals that you find in Zambia today. Of course, they're in dilapidated state. Now, outside of a few quite good hospitals in Osaka, it seems that a patient is more likely to survive if they stay outside in a public hospital than if they entered into it today. And this is testament to the decades of neglect in maintaining our national infrastructure. Hospitals are crumbling with insufficient staff, shortages of medicine and lack of basic medical equipment. Again, this should cause an outrage, since it's something that affects all of us. That is apart from those who can fly abroad to receive medical treatment for the minor of infection. And Kaunda's government invested in the health of people. You cannot develop a country if you are led by sick people. But they also invested in education. Some of the schools they construct alongside the hospitals, and many speakers have spoken to this, so I'll only belabor the point. But the point to further illustrate this idea that even the University of Zambia, where I teach, was constructed in 1966. They recognize we have a huge issue here of an undereducated population. What do? We need to build the secondary schools and primary schools. Yes, those are important, but we also need a university. Where have you had a country developing using primary school graduates? We have had the UN goals emphasizing the idea that we should have an educated primary population at primary level. But it's also even more important to have a critical mass of educated people at university level. And Kaunda's government built much of the infrastructure that we are using today, and we are turning into colleges. So leaders must understand that development essentially is investing in the health and education of citizens. The first lesson is in the 1970s. And for me, what we learned from that era, from that decade, that leadership means building inclusion, solidarity, and identity. And I'll speak very briefly to these three aspects. Building inclusion, the 1990s when Kaunda together one party state. But it's also a time when we actually see this idea of one Zambia, one nation being acted upon, not just used as a slogan to be said before the 19 hours main news on 10 BC. No, it was actually lived. In terms of composition of cabinet, Kaunda's cabinet, for example, appointment public service, there was what he called ethnic balancing. You looked at the cabinet of Kaunda, whether you were Lozi, Bemba, Chewa, Vale, Tonga, you felt represented because you could see yourself there. You look at today's cabinet, for example, you see clear marginalization of ethnic groupings. And when they try foul, you say, shut up, it's one Zambia, one nation. One Zambia, one nation should mean all of us feel included in this space. Inclusion means promoting ethnic diversity and reflecting that the character of our Zambia in the appointments public service. But also you had people who were less able, for example, in cabinet, different classes of society were represented there. A leader has to deliberately build inclusion because not something that will happen on its own. But also there was solidarity. And solidarity here meant the support that Kaunda and his friends extended to the liberation of Southern Africa. Now, he could have easily said, what happens in Angola, what happens in Malawi, what happens in Zimbabwe, in South Africa is their problem. He didn't do that. He understood that the problems that are affecting these countries will affect Zambia tomorrow. My colleague Grave Chira was talking about the protests in South Africa at the moment. They're actually linked to us because if there are protests in South Africa, tomorrow Zambian shops won't have goods. Why? It shows our interconnectedness. And Kaunda understood that we should not, as leaders and even as citizens, close our eyes to what's happening elsewhere in the region, especially in SADC region. Look at what's happening in Swaziland, or rather in Swatini. Look at what's happening in Mozambique. Look at what's happening in South Africa, and even in Zambia. The closing political space. SADC leaders should not just use that institution as a talking shop. We should use that as a vehicle for resolving people's challenges in each of these countries, because we are interlinked. And Kaunda went out of his way to pour Zambia's resources to the liberation of these countries. And I've said somewhere else that, in a fair world, Kaunda actually should have won a Nobel Peace Prize for his contribution to the liberation of Southern Africa, because it's fair to say he's not just the father of Zambia, the father of Southern Africa in terms of liberation of these regions. Somebody even more important, I would say, than Nelson Mandela when it comes to the liberation of Southern Africa. And the final point is on identity. Again, Great Kalu and Maureen Land have spoken to this idea. Identity here, you shape the Zambian identity. The question to ask ourselves is, what makes us Zambian outside the accident of our birthplace, or that passport that we only use when we are traveling, for example? What are the key things that we can say, oh, this is what really holds us? Art, music, sports, research, scholarship, culture, the dress, those are part of the thing that should shape our identity, but they have to be done. They don't just happen on their own. Kaunda's government invested in these things. It was a government that attempted to create a larger narrative of nationhood through the use of media, newspapers, radio, and television, or education system, that is classroom from primary school to university, or church, popular forms of entertainment like music and theater, another medium that could bring various forums, be it chiefs or artists, together to participate in the creation of a genuine national identity. There was a stage where the state provided, support for music. The Zamrock, we talk about the Kalindula. It thrived in that era because the state actually participated in helping artists to forge that identity. We should not just look at art as something that should leave to Maureen Landa, music should leave it to Pirato and the others. This is part of shaping who we are. And it's important really to pay attention to how we can mobilize all these aspects of our Zambian society and create a genuine national identity. But they also supported, research. Kaunda's government was very good at encouraging research, whether it's publication of books in local languages like, Bemba, Lozi. You had the Zambia Education Publishing House. People were encouraged to write. That's how you carry knowledge from one generation to the other. People participated in writing this, and the state was very active in supporting that kind of research, whether it's at the university level, whether it's at the level of just ensuring that we create this knowledge about our own history and the people, our own tradition. You can't have that history documented if you are simply relying on commercial publishers. They are interested in profit. The state has to take part in generating this kind of knowledge because it's important to understand where we come from. Of course, Kaunda also published his own works about his own life in Zambia. Those are well known. Letter to My Children, I'm very referring to that. He wrote a book about his own experience, I think published in 1962, about his memoirs. And in that sense, he understood the importance of writing memoirs, a task that many people of this generation, I would say, have not taken quite seriously. In countries like Zimbabwe and South Africa, nationalists and other prominent figures are seriously writing their own memoirs or leaving their own private papers for others to work on in the future. And that's hardly the case in Zambia. Kaunda himself has told us in that regard, of course, he has died without his memoirs. But those who belong to that...
quickly here. Just to ask, so this point you're making about research and publishing and writing, is this number 5 or is it part of number 4? I'm liking sort of how you've put them chronologically in number, but also in time. So confirm whether that's number 5 or 4, and then let's get number 5 as well. Thank you.
That's number 4. So number 4 had, building inclusion, solidarity, and identity. That's part of an identity because you can't have an identity without knowledge. And I was making the point that those who belong to Zambia's first generation, that is those who were alive at independence, are gradually leaving us. Some years from now, there will be no one left who was an adult in 1964. But having been key protagonists in national struggle and played active roles in Zambia's, during Zambia's first 56 years of independence, for example, many expect these nationalist figures, now advanced in years, and with most of their lives behind them, to reflect upon, to use their unique experiences to provide an insider's view of the country's evolution. Because in our country, let's face it, we have a young population. And decades of underfunding and neglect have undermined the capacity of local scholars to conduct historical research. So memoirs enable current generation to understand what has happened before. Autobiographical writings is not a personal vanity or for the benefit of an individual's own descendants. It's a wider social purpose. And even Mrs. Kapwepwe, you know so much, Aka, Musa Mwenye, don't wait until you are in your 80s and 90s to start writing memoirs. Right now, Kaunda has died without giving us his memoirs. So don't wait until you are too old, write. And if there will be something to improve upon, then you can update those memoirs so that at least you don't leave us with anything. The point number 5 is for the 1980s. And I think the key point from the 1980s that democracy is addictive. Zambians love having a say in how they are governed because and no leader can actually contain that aspiration for democracy. What we see in the 1990s is the bad side of Kaunda, the repressive nature of Kaunda, and leaders are like that. Kaunda wasn't a saint. We should celebrate what he did, what he got well, and we should also learn from what he did wrong. One of the wrong things actually you can find in the 1980s, very repressive. Look at how he treated Kapepo, for example. It was very bad. Some of Kapepo's children were harassed by state officials. I don't know how much he knew about this, but this was something that was close to Kaunda. And you can imagine what happened to the ordinary people who lost their jobs, who were harassed by state security. On different people have stories to tell about that period. It was very repressive. But what you see in that period is the state that is clamping down on civil liberties. It's closing the political space. And when you do that, you make opposition to you find expression in the most uncivilized of ways. You had coup attempts during that decade. 1980, you had a coup attempt against Kaunda. 1988, you had a coup attempt led by Keston Tembo. And then you had 1990 in June by Captain Mambaru Chembe. All these coup attempts were, at least the later ones, were massively celebrated on the streets of Osaka, for example. Why? People were fed up. It was pent up frustration. A leader should be very sensitive to public mood. When people are complaining, we feel that the space is closed. Pay attention. Elias Chipimo made a point that he ended him in prison. He said the multi-party system is the surest way of avoiding coups and eliminating the disgraceful tendency of president ending up with bullets in their heads. Coup attempts have gone, but we still have restrictions in Zambia today. It's important for leaders to listen because democracy, as I would say, is addictive. And Kaunda learned it the hard way in 1991 when he fought the elections. He thought he would win, but he was badly defeated. But to his credit, he gracefully conceded defeat and handed power to Chiluba. And in that sense, you could say he's actually a Democrat because he provided an example in terms of tradition of how you gracefully concede power and basically hand over. The sixth lesson happened in the 1990s. And that is the need for leaders to invest in lasting constitutional reform and build on a predecessor's work. The constitution that Zambia is using now is actually the 1991 constitution. We have made amendments in 1996 and 2016 recently under President Lungu. Now, what we see there is actually a leader who had a genuine national interest at heart, because he could have easily modified the constitution the way that he wanted. Remember, he called the election 2 years before his end of his 5-year term. But he mobilized diverse interests from civil society, academia, church, educated elites to come together and participate in building a genuinely democratic and popular constitution and broad-based constitution. It's the one we are still using. Why? He was able to rise above personal interests. The constitution should not be tailored towards blocking an individual, suiting an individual's interest. No, it's a national constitution we are writing here, not the party constitution. And we have failed to actually build on that. Look at what we are still doing. We are still editing this thing that Kaunda left us with. But also it's important to build on your predecessor's work, because what Chiluba does in the 1990s is really to throw the baby with the dirty water. Instead of taking lessons, what industries Kaunda build, as Greg mentioned, that could actually build upon? What are some of the things that Kaunda did that we should not discard because he has lost power? We have to do better at the current generation in terms of how we actually led to the efforts of a previous leader. President Lungu, for example, has done very well in giving us that constitution that they wanted to change last year or the other year. It's a very good improvement what we have done before. And whoever comes, whether it's him or somebody else, they should at least make sure that they don't change the constitution, the current constitution, because the provisions that are there are very progressive, and I give him credit for that. If he will change it, I'll be the first one to condemn him. The final point is in the decades of the 2000s, and the lesson there is life after State House. When Kaunda left power in 1991, he was a deeply unpopular figure, blamed for Zambia's collapsed economy and widely regarded as repressive. But over the next 30 years, he lived long enough to actually see his reputation improve. And I would say in that sense that time really rehabilitated President Kaunda in the sense that what has aided him to become this revered figure is not just the manner in which the graceful way in which he considered defeat and left power, something that we see with President Rupiah Bada during 2011. Again, that's a huge credit to Kaunda because he sets that tradition. but it's also the failure of his successor to basically eclipse his achievements in office. We are looking back now with nostalgia to the 1970s. Oh, education was free, health services were free. Look at the people who came before me, even in football. We're doing well in everything. What happened? What happened to us? We are able now to actually look back on Kaunda's time in office with a critical distance and say he wasn't actually a bad leader. But key to that is the fact that his successors pale in comparison to Kaunda in relation to what they've achieved in office. But he was also able, of course, to modify himself and involve himself in HIV/AIDS and other humanitarian ways. But what is crucial is that a leader's willingness to leave office is informed by what they did when they were in power. If a leader stole, they are unlikely to leave because they would rather continue until they die in office or identify a planned successor to protect them from persecution. Kaunda didn't steal. We have news that he left with $8,000 in office. And that's why he was willing to even go. So leaders should understand that when you are in power, your legacy is informed by what you actually do when in power and your willingness to step aside when people no longer want you. And in conclusion, I'll just say that as a country, I do think that we are yet to fully comprehend what we had and then lost in President Kaunda. His star is shining now, and I think he's likely to shine even brighter in the years to come as the present and immediate future shows the stark incompetence of our leaders, as if to mock us for not appreciating Kaunda and his leadership when we had them. Now that Kaunda is dead, I do think that he will live forever. Thank you.
Sishiwa, thank you so much. That's really fantastic. I think sort of the way you've outlined this, taking us back to the 1930s and bringing us to the 2000s, you've covered both the bright side and also the side that is not so bright. And as you say, I think that was a holistic picture that you're giving us. I also think that you've tied quite well most of the points that have also come before you in terms of just putting them in a very clear, succinct way for us to sort of tabulate as points and notes to take home. We have very tiny one question for you just to close the session. And Melissa, I don't know whether you would like to ask Sishiwa. It's a personal question. Did you get to meet Kaunda? If you did, what was sort of your own personal feeling and what did you take away from that? Melissa, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you're right, Muyatwa. He has actually nicely summed up all the way from Pan-Africanism to, to heroes, heroines, servitude, Zambian identity. It's like he's really just summarized everything for us. And even just seeing the questions that are being raised in the chat, I wish we had the whole day, honestly, to speak towards this subject. In fact, it would take, like you said, Kaunda will live on. It would take a long time for us to even begin to distill really carefully all these different aspects. And I hope that as he lives longer in the current form, even though he's not physically with us, that the spirit of that era will continue to look at us. So I guess the question then is what you've asked, Muyatwa, what's the personal impression that you've had? You've spoken more or less from, someone outside looking in, but as somebody who might have had personal interaction with KK, what do you take away?
I think there are two things that you take away. The first is love for people, for human beings. KK had boundless faith in human beings, in human improvement. He loved people. And when I had a chance to meet Kaunda at several intervals, sometimes just going to listen, sit at his feet and listen to what it means to serve. And how could you save Zambia outside public office? Because we often think that you can only save people when you are a politician. No, you can serve people in different ways, different stations. You can be an academic, you can be a scientist, you can be a teacher. All these are important, and in one of his works actually said, it is through the sum total of our countless isolated efforts that everything is changed, which shows the need to coalesce, the energies of everyone and put together. And what struck me about Kaunda every time I had the privilege of meeting him was how much he would welcome you, regardless of your status, whether you are young, whether you are old, whether you are a state official, whether you're just an ordinary citizen. He had time for people. He had this incredible capacity to make you feel important. Even if you are a nobody, I guess, like Sishua, even if you didn't know him, he'll find time to meet you. And it's important to actually understand that it's how we make people that really also define our legacy. And Kaunda had that rare gift. But also, the other point is really and understanding that leadership is example. For him, that is a message that he kept on emphasizing. You cannot be a leader telling people to act this way when you're actually doing the opposite. Zambians learn not so much by telling them to say, go and do this. They learn by seeing the leader do it. I'll give you a simple example. There was a time when a video went viral of somebody who was saying, and people took up that and started reproducing that in various ways. It was somebody who was making reference to President Lungu at a campaign, and the president danced along that. And people began to replicate that. It's a simple example, but it shows you the power of example. People find it easy to actually model themselves alongside what they see their leaders doing. And KK was very good at that. When, for example, at the time when HIV/AIDS was not known, was something to be hidden, you have a leader who comes up and says, my son has died of HIV/AIDS. That's the example. When there's a crisis, a leader doesn't hide. You don't communicate to people using social media, Facebook, whatever, statements or press aids. You come in front as a leader and confront the crisis and say, we will pull through this. You inspire people. You inspire hope. You don't stick behind. So Kaunda was very good at that. He was somebody who understood where there's a crisis, he's in front. Where there is a moment of celebration, he's actually behind. He lets the people be in front. And this is something that, in my conversation with him, I understood to be something deeply intense and personal. But ultimately, I think that what Kaunda actually did in power was to simply provide an expression of his values. So the presidency for him was simply a platform for expressing those values that were very personal to him. And people are not revealed in power. It's like power can expose who they are. If you get a musician like Pilato, for example, you make him president, what he's likely to become is not new. It's what we are seeing him actually doing through music, because music is simply the platform on which he's expressing himself. And Kaunda had these innate values in him, organic, if you say that. You don't pick these from the classroom. No, it's some kind of organic intellectual who had these innate values and capacity to actually affect you and teach you without telling you, say, this is what I'm teaching you, to actually learn that ultimately what really defines every human being is the values that they have. Thank you.
Sishua, thank you so much. You've really capped it up nicely, and we appreciate and thank all the speakers that we had this evening. It's been a long marathon of conversations, but we are looking back at the life of somebody who's done a lot of work. And as I was saying at the beginning, we cannot encapsulate it in one word. We can say he's an icon, he's a philosopher, he's a statesman. It is still not sufficient. One book will not be able to cover everything that he's done, but we've had a conversation today to look back at the different lessons that we can pick from this man. And so we hope that we each are taking things that we have learned at a personal level. We will call upon Melissa, if you're there, if there's anything else that you'd like to say before we close from the moderators, and then we will pass on to Belinda and then to Reverend Susan Matale for the closing processes. But Melissa, over to you before we close. We pass on the floor.
I think it's to just say thank you to all the speakers for giving us the opportunity for them to share and to speak and to teach, and for us to learn from their experiences, from what they've had to share, from what they've had to synthesize over time, and to just say thank you so much. That's all I would say, Muyato, for now. Thank you.
Great. So we'll call upon Belinda Chanda. She's the founder of the Network of Zambians Working in the United Nations Abroad, which is one of the institutions that have organized and put this program together. And Belinda will make a few remarks, after which she will call upon Reverend Matale to take us through the closure of this event. Belinda, over to you. Belinda, over to you for the...
means so hard and you don't know what it all means. But don't you ever let go. See, there's a reason you're still standing after all you've seen. So don't you ever let go. Don't let go. Don't let go. Oh my. Please just don't ever let go.
Thank you so much to everybody that has stayed with us tonight. I would like to first, sound out the eminence of our distinguished panelists. Thank you for gracing us with your brilliance, and the wrap up that my moderators have made could not be done better. So we want to thank you most sincerely for that. I also like to thank the Kaunda family for being with us and sharing some intimate insights into the life of our founding father, Dr. Kenneth David Kuchizya Kaunda. I'd also like to thank the eloquence of our moderators who have, iterated along the way and ensured that we try to make some of the time. It's not very easy to straddle all these 6 themes which are interrelated and mutually supportive. And I think we've achieved the objective of our session today. I'd also like to thank the excellence of our organizers in the background. It's been nonstop since we mooted this idea and joined forces with the various entities that are working on this event today. So I'd like to extend a very big thank you, especially to the tech team as well. And also to our engaged audience who has stayed to and run the course of this event. And I hope that everybody has taken something from this discussion. It is my honor and privilege to call upon Reverend Susan Matterley to give us her remarks as well as a closing prayer. Thank you, be blessed, and good night.
Oh boy. Good evening, everyone. It has indeed been an awesome day. The experts have spoken. Their timely, mind-shifting, bold statements, insightful, deserving time on our Zambian state media for education of all our Zambians. But of course, that's a pipe dream for now. President Kaunda's homegoing has indeed helped us today to evaluate, assess, and to recall wonderful memories of where we have come from. This occasion also helps us to celebrate, like somebody said, other deserving women and men who made us who we are today. And indeed, of course, President Kaunda was a leader, as we have heard, among equals. The elephant in the room is the legendary President Kaunda. As I was listening to the brilliant presentations this evening, a story or a writing comes to mind from the scriptures, and that's what I want to close this session with, because I think it's important. There are 3 lessons that I very quickly want to go through. It's the writing of our brother, Apostle Paul, to his young son, spiritual son, Timothy, from the book of 2 Timothy 4, verses 5 and 8. I'm not reading it in the interest of time. But the lesson that comes out of this is talking about a good fight, encouraging Timothy to keep the good fight because his time has come. And therefore the work must continue, because a good fight is that which makes better the people, to endeavor to leave a good legacy, a legacy that will stand the test of time, helping people to find themselves, helping people to live a life worth living. That is what is called a good fight in the scriptures. Dr. Kaunda did that even at the expense of his own life and that of his family. He took risks for humanity. I recall him many times saying, man west, man east, man south, man north, because for him it did not matter what color you were or what tribe you were. As long as you were created in the image of God, you were important to him. He used his position very effectively as a leader to achieve God's purposes for his people, to ensure that people had life and have it in abundance and in freedom. And therefore, the first lesson is that of a good fight. The second one is choosing his fight wisely. He was telling Timothy, choose your fights wisely, because there are some fights which are useless, some fights which are necessary. The good fight is the one that makes a difference in people's lives. And so the lesson here is our father, President Kaunda, chose his fights wisely, only those that benefited humankind. So if you must fight a good fight, go for a knockout like he used to do. Don't shadow box in the air with no real focus. Fights which are not life, playing with life rather. At the end of the day, you can say like Paul, I have finished my race and now go to my Father to get my crown of righteousness. Miles Monroe says that some people, like somebody said, go to their graves full of knowledge which goes to waste. But our president has gone to his grave empty because he utilized all the resources that God had given him for the improvement of man and woman and for the common good. The third lesson is that Paul said, I've kept the faith. Kaunda did not give up his gospel of love, peace, and justice. No matter how hard things might have been, he held on to the message of peace, justice, love, compassion with all his might. Whatever was for the common good, he did. So it does not mean that there were no difficulties in his life. I'm not saying it was plain sailing for him, but the Bible warns that if you're doing a good fight, troubles will come, challenges will come, difficulties will come, but keep the faith anyhow. But through it all, he was resolved to contribute in a big way to Ubuntu humanity. And now, so he's gone to his grave empty. He has kept the faith. He has fought a good fight. And he has left a wonderful legacy. Now it's time for him to hear from heaven. He has finished his race. He has fought a good fight. He did not shadow fight. He kept his faith, did not give up, no matter what. So God now is saying, well done, my good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful. Come and rest from your labors. Shall we pray? Dear Lord, we want to thank you for this very productive day. Our prayer is that you do it again, our Lord and our God, to raise men and women who have track records, who are going to take this country forward. We are tired of wallowing in mediocrity. We are tired of wallowing in poverty, Lord. And so we are praying that you do it again. Raise men and women who have a vision. We also take this opportunity to thank you, Lord, for all those on whose shoulders Dr. Kaunda stood. This we ask and pray in the name of Jesus. And so for all those who've been listening, to all the participants, may the good Lord bless you, and don't tire to do good. Now go and continue to serve the Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Good night, everyone. Thank you, Kalu. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Mwenye. Thank you, Mundaula. Thank you, Shishua. Thank you,
Thank you so much, Carl.
God bless.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Freedom fighter, why away, Kaunda way. Unamonga ni kutulo chate, oh, dati mulale muchibotera. Tiriro, hecho watushila tiriro. Shikoro, yukele kwewa kisha babutungo wapokele.
Unity mwaletele mwepo imitundu wingika mushipanga wanu kwabula nekapatulula wanu Zambia one nation humanizi mukuwombela pamwe mwepo.
A dark cloud has befallen Zambia. Dear Lord, help us unite, like Kaunda said, one Zambia, one nation.
From your words. Alengi, pale, lila masuti. Lilo tata Kaunda wale lile chalo. You are the symbol of peace in Africa. Lisa kupale, utushe mchibote.
Truly African leader no mutimo ukulu lesa pokelela koba shikulu ikumbi na rifita tulelo shava shikulu tuli mufila mbafwebe shikulu
Family mama ombele muno Zambia na mu Africa batotela mwende bino.
We knew this day would come, but we still not ready. We want to celebrate your life, but our hearts are heavy. But your legacy will live on. The father of the nation, Super Ken, so long.
Zambia, Tanzania, South Africa, yalila. Onse tulelila, Kaunda tusha.
Our father of the nation, we celebrate your life. We'll greatly miss you. A true Pan-Africanist, father of a nation. Twas Santa Mwane.
Africa yarira, abantu barira. Zambia, watufundile ukutemwana nokusungana wawulo kwakanikana wanu Zambia wanu nesheni
Neubatanga uswalisa nebana bahao Ndata wasishemu walilato Lwabulata keke Lwabulata keke
Hello guys, Patson Daka here. I'm very happy and excited to join this great historic club, Leicester City. Come on, Leicester.
Enoch, welcome to Brighton and Hove Albion. You must be delighted to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a pleasure really to be here. I'm excited and I'm happy really to be here. I feel like home already.
2 new signings as well. Fashion Sakala's coming in after a productive season in Belgium. He will make us a lot quicker, a lot more dynamic, and gives the team and the squad a lot more pace in the forward areas. So I'm really excited to work with him. There's potential there on a big scale, so that's an exciting one.
So thanks so much to all our attendees. It's lovely that you've stayed on with us. It's been great having you, but we really do need to send our volunteers off as well that have been working all day. So if you could please give us a wave and yeah, then we can pick up another time. Thank you.